tonight, it's going to be a bullpen game for the Cardinals, and Bryce Elder is getting a start for the Atlanta Braves. That's one of those games, coin flip, neither team feels great about their pitching situation. You go into that and hope for the best.
I was going to say, tell them who's pitching on the other side, because neither of those ones feel good about it.
I'm curious, how does this change, if at all, your outlook for this series? Cardinals already banked one. They got the first game. That was a big one for them. Reynaldo Lopez going up against Gibby. You have a bit of a disadvantage there in terms of effectiveness, but maybe your guy goes a little deeper into the game. How are you feeling today going into this doubleheader, Alex? Given what the pitching situation is for both teams.
It changes it a little bit because I was really intrigued watching this team go up against Chris Sale and Reynaldo Lopez. I felt like that was going to be another real telling opportunity for the Cardinals, and now you don't get that chance, which changes it somewhat. But you are still going up against one really good pitcher in Reynaldo Lopez, so that's going to give you an opportunity to see your offense. And personally, I think it's a good factor to see what a bullpen game looks like for you in terms of going up against a scuffling offense with an entire bullpen being used in that game. So I went into the series feeling one way, and I'm going to exit out the same way. If you can take 2 of 3 against the Atlanta Braves, I'm getting more and more closer to putting that conductor hat on.
Wow.
Because to me, especially with the adversity you have to go through when you're playing a doubleheader after already taking one, this is a opportunity for you to take 2 of 3 against a team that's standing above you in the National League wild card. And at that point, there's nothing else for me the team can prove. You've beaten all of these teams below you. You've beaten the Reds. You've beaten the Pirates. You've beaten the Giants, the Padres. It's you versus the Phillies, Dodgers, Brewers. So if you can take 2 of 3 in this series or possibly sweep now that you have this bullpen game, it's going to be hard to deny and be negative about this team until I get to October.
Yeah, and I actually like their chances more with the fact that you now have the Braves going to Bryce Elder. Your offense has been playing well. Now, granted, that means Liberatore could still have a tough time against the Atlanta Braves as he starts game 2. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't like the Cardinals going to a bullpen game for game number 2. I'd much rather go with a bullpen game once you get back towards the Gibson spot on rotation.
So I do have an update on that.
Oh, well,
you want to hear this?
Palante.
So the Cardinals are going to have Chris Roycroft available as the 27th player for the doubleheader. He is going to be a part of what is essentially an opener situation for the Cardinals later on this evening. Now, this is coming from John Denton of MLB.com. He said the Cardinals were originally planning to have a bullpen start on Friday to give their starters a rest. Instead, they will do that in tonight's game 2 with Matthew Liberatore and Chris Roycroft. You'll have Miles Mikolas on Thursday. Andre Palante will start in Friday's affair against the Cincinnati Reds. Does that change anything about what you were about to say in terms of how they were planning to use this? Because we thought maybe Sunday would be the time when you would need the next bullpen game. It sounds like they were going to do so on Friday. So does this change how you feel at all?
No, I still would rather go to the bullpen game later on in the week, whether that be Friday, Sunday, whenever they were going to get to that spot again, just because I feel like you can prepare for it better when you have a couple of games in between. And I know that's a little harder to say because it's, well, what do you mean they're going to play 3-4 games? I've got to get through those. Well, Ali Marmol's done this already this year where he's been managing with a 4-man rotation and in his head trying to compute how he's going to get through that game when it gets on turn. I don't necessarily like it on a day of a doubleheader because anything can go right here in game 1. You know, Kyle Gibson could go 8 innings and really save this bullpen if Ollie won't pull him after 7. But it could be one of those where Gibson struggles and you have to try and pull him through 4 innings, and all of a sudden you've got to start burning bullpen arms in game 1 to give yourself a fighting chance, and boom, now you've got a bullpen game in game 2. And unlike on a day where, you know, if you had to use a bullpen arm on, say, Thursday, and they're doing this bullpen game on a Friday, that bullpen arm could pitch on Thursday and potentially pitch on Friday. Nobody's pitching twice today. They're not going to pitch somebody twice during a doubleheader. That's just unheard of for Major League Baseball.
So here's this would be my pushback. If I was Ollie, this is what I would say to you, T-Bone. I'm going to ask a question first, and then I'll get into my answer second. Which starters, name the 2 starters that you trust the most to get deep into a game right now on this Cardinals rotation? Who are the 2 starters that you trust the most to get deep into a game currently?
I'd say Gibson, Gray.
You trust Gray to get deeper into a game right now than Miles Mikolas?
I'd go Gibson, Mikolas.
I'd still say
Mikolas has gone 6, 6, 6, 7, 6 1/3, 6.
Yeah, but I'm going off of number of pitches, and Sonny Gray stopping at 80.
It's fair.
80, 85. And Mikolas will go past that. So, yeah, I would say Gibson and Mikolas are the 2 I trust the most.
In terms of getting deep into a game, I'm with you, Alex. And in the next 2 games around this doubleheader situation where they're going to a bullpen game tonight, It's Gibson starting in the day game, and then tomorrow it's Miles Michaelis. And so it gives you as much buffer in terms of innings that you can expect. There's no way to totally prepare for this, but if you're going into a game, who do I expect to go to the deepest? It would be Gibson and Michaelis. So the best place to sandwich that potential bullpen game would in theory be tonight. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to work. You may go out there today and Kyle Gibson he had extended rest. He doesn't have it the way you normally would expect, and he ends up giving you 5 innings today instead of his usual 6 to 7. That's possible. But you prepare the best way that you can. You go with the information that you have available to you, and the information that we have available says Gibson and Michaelis are your 2 best options to be able to buffer you from that bullpen game. You also have an extra reliever available for you today. So with all of that information, and now knowing that they were planning to do this on Friday, I'm guessing they just want to get Sonny Gray an extra day of rest, which, once again, guys, let's read with their actions, not their words.
They're scared.
They're telling you everything you need to know about how they want to handle Sonny Gray this year. They are going to be as careful as humanly possible with that dude. They're basically looking at him and saying, our entire season rests on your right arm. Please stay healthy. Please, for the love of God.
Wrap him in bubble wrap.
Stay healthy.
That's going to be tough when you get to September and you've been babying it so much that he's unable to pitch the distance when you need him to.
It's a legitimate concern. I think they would tell you, hey, let's get to September. We'll figure that out when we get there. Our goal is to get him there. And then hopefully we get our best shot with Sonny Gray as a part of our rotation. He's the guy that gives us a fighting chance once we get to September and October. But that would be my argument in favor of the way they're handling this, T-Bone.
And I understand the extra reliever does make, to me, the argument a little easier. The problem for me is I got to cover 18 innings today, and best case scenario, my starter in Gibson, let's say he goes 7. Okay, well, that still leaves me with 11 innings to cover from my bullpen. And that's including the next game. Sure. I understand Palante's not going to go deep, but could he go 5? If I can get 12 of 18 innings covered with starters
and he's
today,
shown you the ability to do that.
I feel a lot more comfortable doing that than I do having to cover potentially 10-plus innings with my bullpen today alone. And that's why I just don't necessarily like the idea of going with a bullpen game during a doubleheader. I'd much rather do a bullpen game when it's just you're playing one game on that day.
And this is one of those matchups, too, that I think I would much rather have 2 pitchers that I trust than going with a bullpen game that's uncertainty. Because even though, and I understand Matthew Liberatore calms down the last time we saw him get the start.
And to be fair, the other option here is Palante.
Which
I don't know how much I trust him against this team either because of how many right-handed bats they have. I wonder if that's part of the calculus here. The Braves have a bunch of right-handed bats. The Reds, which is what he's going to be going up against, Palante, will be putting more left-handed bats into the lineup against him because they just have more of those available. I wonder if that's part of it. But I say all of that. Matthew Liberatore is the one that's starting. It's not like he's great against right-handed bats either. You didn't have a whole lot of great options for this.
And I'd rather go with a guy that at least I have seen be able to keep the storm calm rather than Matthew Liberatore, who, again, I understand he calmed down that last time we saw him, but that could have been really ugly, and it might get uglier when you go up against a better hitting team like the Atlanta Braves.
Cardinals doubleheader today against the Atlanta Braves. 12:45 first pitch in the first game of this doubleheader, day-night doubleheader today. Gibson versus Lopez. Final thing on this before we get to something that Alex is mad about hockey-related. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. Guys, I am curious, why do we look at the Cardinals and the Braves as so much different? And the reason why I'm saying that, and I'm talking about in 2024, don't look at the history. I know that influences this stuff, but look at 2024 and look at the way that these two teams have played so far this season. The Braves right now are essentially 3 games ahead of the St. Louis Cardinals. If you're looking at wins, they have 43 wins on the season. The Cardinals have 40. If the Cardinals win the 2 games today, no guarantee, but let's say they do. You're right there with the Atlanta Braves. 1 game here, 1 game there. The offense has been very inconsistent for the Braves. The vast majority of their players not named Marcell Ozuna are underperforming relative to expectations. Yes, they do have 2 players that are hurt right now. They're not getting them back. That's not going to change the rest of the way. So it shouldn't influence the way that we view the Braves the rest of the season with Acuna and Strider. Their rotation has been better, I think, than expected, given the injuries. Cardinals' rotation has been better than expected, given the injuries. These 2 teams, in a lot of ways, are mirror images of one another with what they have been so far in 2024. And yet, I think most Cardinals fans and casual baseball fans would say, I would expect the Braves to be better than the Cardinals the rest of the way. And I'm just asking, why is that? Why do you think that we feel that way about the Braves compared to the Cardinals when their resumes are not all that different so far this season.
Resumes, if you're just looking at this season, I agree. You shouldn't feel that much different, which is why I said, like, if they could take 2 of 3, I'm much more inclined to look at this team as the better team than the Atlanta Braves. But for me, it's track record. And I go off of the Atlanta Braves seem to be a team that doesn't need to play playoff baseball in May, June, July, because they know that late July, early August, they can flip the switch and get in, and you know how to do damage. And to me, the Cardinals are playing their playoff baseball right now. Like, they don't have enough track record for me to look at it and say, yeah, they could do some damage and figure it out. Like, the Atlanta Braves might not be good right now, but I have a feeling that the Atlanta Braves know when to turn it on, and the Cardinals, I don't feel that same way.
And for me, I think it's probably, and I don't think I fall as much victim to this, but I think it is just when fans talk about the Atlanta Braves, you talk about Austin Riley, you talk about Matt Olson, Ozuna, who's playing like an MVP caliber player right now. But when you talk about their corner infielders, when they are right, their ceiling is MVP caliber players and young. You know, those guys are young. Matt Olson's 30, Austin Riley's 27, because I think that's where the difference is right now, is when Goldie and Arenado struggle, now the original question is, oh, well, it's got to be age. Goldie's almost 40. It's probably age. You know, finally you've hit the decline of Paul Goldschmidt. When you see Olson and Riley struggle, you go, one rough month. Yeah. They'll figure it out. They're young. They're MVP caliber players. They'll get it figured out, and I think that's what the biggest difference is right now.
I would add, like, I've seen somebody on the YouTube chat say, guys, the Braves are better whenever they're healthy. Sure, they're not going to be healthy.
Yeah.
I think you could make a pretty strong argument that the Cardinals actually have, if we're going health as the argument, the Cardinals have the stronger argument in that regard. Wilson Contreras now back, finally, after 6 weeks of being out, and he was the Cardinals' best hitter prior to getting hurt. He was essentially for the Cardinals what Marcell Ozuna has been so far this year for the Braves. Lars Nootbaar, I know people sometimes say, hey, not that good of a... He's a really good player, guys. And if he was in the Braves lineup, he would be one of their top 3 hitters so far this season, based upon OPS. Not an opinion, a fact. That's a big guy to be able to get back on your roster. You look at, some people will say, well, Michael Harris Jr. Yeah, go ahead and look at Michael Harris's numbers so far this season and compare them to what you would expect, reasonably, out of like a Tommy Edman, for example. They're not all that dissimilar there either. So I'm not telling you the Cardinals will be, are, or were better than the Braves, but they're not all that different. And so as we project forward, this is why we had that conversation yesterday about, hey, where do the Cardinals rank right now in the National League? It is not hard to find a way where you've got the 2 teams that are super teams right now, Phillies and Dodgers. Then there's a bunch of teams that are fighting for the 3rd place. The Brewers right now, to me, would be at the top of that list. And it's hard for me to say otherwise until the Cardinals prove they're better than the Brewers on the field. They haven't done that so far this year. The Cardinals are right there behind them, in my opinion. I would probably have them above the Braves currently. So I think we're going to see what that looks like later on this afternoon. If the Cardinals end up winning these 2 games, I think they're going to have a really good argument as being the 3rd or 4th best team in the National League right now. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. The YouTube chat is off and running today. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL is where you can go for the graveyard chat today. We'll get into questions and answers coming up at 11:45. But next, there was a big trade yesterday in the NHL. It took all of us a little bit by surprise. There's 2 reasons why it matters for the St. Louis Blues. We'll tell you about those next here on 101 ESPN. T-Bone on BK. So Jake Walman got traded yesterday, Alex. This one came as a little bit of a surprise.
He's the number one defenseman.
$3.5 million is what his contract is over the next few seasons. He had a no trade list. It was limited. I think it was like 10 teams that he was able to block a trade to. Unfortunately for him, it does not appear that the Sharks were a part of that no trade list.
or he saw what happened to Barclay Goodrow, and he's like, hey, man, I'm not even going to invoke my no trade. Just trade me to whoever.
So one thing that a lot of players will do, I don't know if this was the case with Jake Walman, but T-Bone was asking why yesterday Walman wouldn't have the Sharks, the worst team in the NHL, on his no trade list. That would be a logical destination to have your no trade list on. I think a lot of the time you send in your no trade list at the beginning of the season, and I can't remember when they get updated, but I would imagine it's probably around July 1st.
That's how they got the Patrick Berglund deal done.
So when that happens, a lot of the time in season, guys will want the contenders to be on their no trade list because it allows them more power in where they decide to go, right? So if you're Jake Walman and you think, hey, maybe Detroit's not going to be a great team this year, it's possible that a contender would want to trade for me, especially after he just got a new contract last year. He was seen as like an up-and-coming defenseman around the league, especially as a puck mover. Those guys are always a value at the deadline. Well, I would want to block Tampa Bay and Florida and Vegas because I would want power on where I'm going, or to decide I don't want to move in season, right? I guess he didn't see the potential of getting traded to San Jose in the offseason on the horizon.
What I would tell your friends is you forgot about San Jose. Not that.
And look, I consider myself a pretty optimistic, positive guy on the show. I think we all can agree with that.
Wrong.
I actually don't think this is a bad move by Jake Walman. Like, it sucks to go to a really bad team, but you're 28 years old. You've got one more year after this season on your contract. And if you're an offensive-minded defenseman, you go put up points on a bad San Jose Sharks team, you at least could get yourself a decent long-term contract after this deal.
Yeah, you going to put up points on the San Jose Sharks where nobody's scoring?
Somebody's got to do it, am I right? Somebody's got his hope is Macklin Celebrini decides not to go back to college and comes to the San Jose Sharks as the first overall pick this year.
So that was the move yesterday. There was a couple of takeaways, though, for the Blues as it relates to Jake Walman being traded. Again, this time from the Detroit Red Wings. First of all, the move necessitated the Detroit Red Wings to add in a second-round pick with Jake Walman, and they got, quote, future considerations, end quote. This is a salary dump. Detroit said, we don't want Jake Walman here anymore. We want somebody to take on this entire salary, and apparently this offseason, the going rate to take on $3.5 million is a second-round pick. Good to know. That's something of note for the St. Louis Blues if they're trying to get somebody to take on salary this offseason to get rid, of a defenseman contract, for example. Number two, it's the Detroit Red Wings that decided to do this. They moved a puck-moving defenseman elsewhere to open up salary space, either to retain some of their own players or to go out in free agency, assign a potential star, some free agent forwards, for example, that could be available this offseason that Detroit might be interested in, or to make a trade for another potential puck-moving defenseman. Alex, what was your takeaway yesterday when you saw this Walman trade go down?
It was just that. It was, okay, Detroit just moved their best offensive-minded defenseman on their team. Let me read you guys off the defensemen that are under contract for Detroit next year, and you tell me who's running their power play. Ben Sherratt.
No, I don't think so. That's not exactly his
Justin Hull.
His game.
Not Brett Hull. Justin Hull. I don't know who that is. Not doing it.
I think we talked about him as a potential trade candidate a couple of years ago.
Oli Mata, BK's guy.
Yeah.
He ain't running the power play. And Jeff Petrie. Now, they do have Maurice Seider, but he's more of a two-way defenseman, and they've got another kid, a Swedish kid, that hasn't even played in the NHL yet.
They just won't go on the power play this year.
They're not bringing back Shane. That's smart, 5-on-5. They're not bringing back Shane Gostisbehere, who was on their power play last year, and now you moved on from Jake Walman. They need help offensively on their defense, and I know somebody who is from East Lansing, Michigan, where Detroit is located in Michigan. Like, the first thing I thought of was, Detroit's going to need somebody to run their power play. And guess who is available via trade? Somebody who can run a power play. I don't even know if Steve Yzerman would be interested in that, obviously.
I hope so. I could sell him on it.
Probably. You probably could. Steve Yzerman's not notoriously a guy that's up for long-term contracts with older players, but you got to get somebody. Now, maybe they could go to the free agent market and go throw money at one of these free agent defensemen. But if the Blues are willing to retain salary off of a Torrey Krug, and it doesn't just have to be Torrey Krug. I mean, Nick Leddy could be another one in this situation. Probably not, considering he was just in Detroit and got traded back to St. Louis.
But maybe, though, they decided that trade... between that and the Sonny trade, where they have nobody that remains, maybe they decided those didn't work out so well for them.
The bottom line is there is a need for a puck-moving, offensive-minded defenseman to play for Detroit, and they currently have $32.7 million in projected cap space. Yep. So all I'm saying is keep an eye on that, because when you trade away and don't re-sign a puck-moving defenseman and you're a team that is going to really need power play help this season, you're going to look for somebody who could quarterback a number one power play unit.
So you said before this segment, Alex, that you saw something about Elliot Friedman, who was on a podcast and was talking about what the next few days are going to look like leading into this year's NHL draft and really just the movement around the league that has been stalled because the Stanley Cup final went so long this year.
Yeah.
Are you expecting some big-time movement right now?
I mean, stop me if you've heard this before. I think this draft is going to be crazy. I believe T-Bone and I said that at the draft in Nashville, and not much went down. But Friedman said on 32 Thoughts, quote, "I think this one is going to be a bananas week. I think there is going to be things that happen here that we absolutely do not see coming. The buyout window opens on Sunday. You've got the draft on Friday and Saturday. And just think of the names that we have talked about. This isn't a free agent class season. This isn't a go spend a lot of money in the... There's a reason teams are shedding salary on the trade market, because your upgrade is going to be via trade. And because the cap is rising, you have more teams that are willing to take on more dead cap space that want to be buyers, that want to be rebuilding teams. And you've got other teams that are tight with the cap that need to ship guys out. I agree with Elliot here. I do think we are going to see more movement between tomorrow and the last day of the first week of free agency. So in about a 10-day time frame, I think you're going to see a lot more moves than what's typically done in the NHL.
He's Alex. It's T-Bone on BK. The NHL draft coming up later on this week. Prospect Camp is next week out at Centene, and we will be there in attendance Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So stay locked in right here in your home of the Blues for all of that. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get your questions in. YouTube chat off and running, youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. Coming up next, the Cardinals picked a bad year to pick in the top 10. We'll tell you why next year on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals game was rained out last night, and they will have a split doubleheader today. Game 1 will be at 12:45. Ronaldo Lopez will get the start for the Atlanta Braves. Kyle Gibson will be on the mound for St. Louis, and then Game 2, the doubleheader, will be at 6:15 tonight. Matthew Liberatore will get the start for the St. Louis Cardinals. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got round 1 of the NBA draft for you, and we'll have coverage starting at 6 o'clock. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so we don't do a lot of NBA talk here, but tonight is the NBA draft, and you'll hear it right here on 101 ESPN starting at 6 o'clock. And Alex, I was reading earlier today over on ESPN.com their latest updated edition of their mock draft. And man, there are not a whole lot of college basketball players in this thing. If you want to look at the college basketball players that you watched this year, there's 2 of them from UConn that are projected to go in the top 8. And there are another 2 from any other school in the country projected to go in the top 8. You've got Reed Sheppard, former guard at Kentucky, that's currently projected to go in the top 3, and Dalton Knecht, who previously played at Tennessee, played all over the place in college basketball. He's like 23 years old. He's basically a geriatric in the NBA's terms. He's projected to go number 6 right now to Charlotte. Alex, the reason I bring this up is because, A, I feel like there is less buzz for this year's NBA draft than there has been in years, and I think that's a big part of why is because we don't know most of the players that are projected to go in the top 8 this year. And B, man, what a stark reminder of just how down college basketball was this season. It's no surprise that UConn won the national title when 2 of the top 8 picks are now projected to be players from your team, and the rest of college basketball combined had 2 of the top 8 picks as well. Weird year for college basketball, terrible year for the Atlanta Hawks, big number 1 in the NBA draft.
Yeah, I feel like there is zero hype for this NBA draft.
There's more hype for day 2 than there is for day 1 because of Bronny James.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not kidding.
And then last year it was so much discussion about Wembanyama, who was going to be selected first overall.
Deserved. That guy's amazing.
But that's what you don't have that type of star power. And the one part that I wonder about is if NBA draft is starting to trend more towards like the NHL draft, because
I don't think so, because people are really excited about next year's number 1. Cooper Flagg is like a superstar prospect.
Because I was wondering, because you see so many guys that are getting drafted that are playing overseas, and you don't see them as much as the guys in college. And we talked so much about it during the tournament. Like, there's just no hype surrounding the March Madness because there was no guys to get excited about.
So there's a kid by the name of Cooper Flagg who is going to Duke next year. This guy is like, I guess, the closest thing that I can compare him to, and they're different players. They're very different. But remember when Zion first got to Duke, there was just this buzz about him. It was like, this guy is somebody that you all have to watch. Like, you got to see this kid play. That's basically Cooper Flagg. That's the kind of hype that he's going to come with. Again, different players. Zion, I'm not sure when the last time was that I've seen anybody that played his style above the rim with his athleticism and his offensive game overall at just that size. He's just a freak in terms of the way that he plays basketball. Cooper Flagg is just amazing, apparently. So that's where I will push back a little bit, Alex. But I do think there's something to what you're saying. And I think a big part of it was the G League Ignite stuff that was happening over the last few years. Now, that's gone now. NIL has put that to the wayside. They decided, hey, there's no reason for us to spend money on this development league for college players, essentially, that decide not to go to college when they're getting paid now in college. I think that's good for both the NBA and for college long term. I think that was hurting the draft last year, especially. I think it was like 2 of the top 7 picks were from the G League Ignite. But going forward, I think you're going to see more of those guys that would have gone the G League route head to college again, and that'll be good for everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think that's when you can start to see more of that star power back at the college level, because, again, that's what was really missing this year. It never really felt like you had one guy outside of Zach Edey, but Zach Edey was the old school kind of big man. And,
you
and
didn't expect it to be a top pick in the draft.
Yeah, and he's like now more of a mid-level draft pick in the first round, potentially late first round pick, possibly. And that's not a guy that you really want to be the face of college basketball. You want the guys that you're talking about, the kid that commits to Duke, that's going to be, I hate to say it, the one and done, but can bring some hype to the game again, like a Zion Williamson did. Like a lot of those first overall picks did, like the one and dones with Kentucky, like you had Anthony Davis, for example. That was another one of those guys. So I think once you get back to that, now that you see that G League Ignite thing's now off the table, I think you'll see college basketball get closer to that, and you'll start to see more hype come back towards the NBA draft.
Somebody on the text line said college basketball being so down last year also explains why Illinois was able to advance past the first round. So that's a really good point.
Typically they choke when they came up against talent.
That's the most untrue thing we've ever had texted into this station, and we've had a lot of weird texts.
Let's look at the track record, though. They typically choke in the first round.
It didn't help Mizzou at all now, did it?
Well, Mizzou's a down year.
Or SLU.
I was about to say something positive about your team.
Different coach.
Guess your program. Terrence Shannon, now that the legal side of things has gone away, now he's found to be not guilty, and we'll just set that aside. The legal proceedings have gone their way. He's now eligible to be in the NBA draft, and he's going to go somewhere this year. If you trust the off-court stuff with him, and you think that was just like, hey, there was legitimately confusion, whatever, that guy's going to be a good NBA player, man. I don't think he's going to be somebody that can be a top 4 player on a championship contender or anything like that. But if you're like the Dallas Mavericks and you need somebody to come off of the bench and be one of those like guys that can go get their own bucket as your 7th man in a championship type of team, I think Terrence Shannon can be that guy for you. He has a clear plan when he's attacking the basket. His shot improved over time at Illinois. I think he can be somebody that ends up being a really nice piece for a team at the end of this year's first round.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see where he ends up going because I think he's more explosive now than he was when he first started at Illinois. He's got the shot that has improved. You know who he reminds me of? Now, I don't know if he'll ever get to become a 20-point player, is Miles Bridges. I think he can be what Miles Bridges is for the Charlotte Hornets. Now, again, I don't know 20 points. That feels a little high, but I could see where he could be like a 7th, 8th man off the bench that could average like maybe 12 to 15 points a game, can grab a couple rebounds, play solid defense once you get to the playoffs for that. I do like whoever gets him late in the first round or potentially in the second. I think he's going to be one of the steals of the draft. And I'm not just saying that as an Illini fan. I think he is a legitimate NBA player.
I'm always surprised by how big he is because he plays like a guard. He has like the skills of a guard. He's like 6'6". Yeah. Like for him to be that big, that's exactly what the NBA is looking for right now. All right, speaking of drafts, the MLB draft is coming up soon. And apparently it stinks. Keith Law described the 2024 class as, quote, the worst Major League Baseball draft class I've ever worked on.
There's Mr. Positivity, Keith Law.
Certainly the worst that I've seen since the 2016 class. Alex T-Bone went through the 2016 class earlier today with me. Oh boy, that was the Dakota Hudson draft for the
Ace
Cardinals.
In the making. The Cardinals
the Dylan
didn't
Carlson draft. Unfortunately,
Delvin
also
Perez.
the Zach Gallen draft.
I remember that Delvin Perez was so hyped. He was the best available prospect when that pick happened.
It was. I still maintain that was the right move for them. Now,
absolutely.
It failed spectacularly, but
that was a Dodgers move where you took a risk and you hope it pays off, and it didn't.
They did what they could with the players that were available to them. This kid got pegged with PEDs. And what we came to know is that's why he had power.
Makes a lot of sense.
The only power came from him being on performance enhancers. And then after he stopped taking performance enhancers, it went away and it was gone. And then he never became much of anything in the Cardinals minor league system. But you look back at that draft, like the top 6 guys, just as context, Mickey Moniak, who I think is just now becoming a legitimate big leaguer, Nick Senzel, Ian Anderson, who got traded for pennies on the dollar this offseason. Riley Pint was with the Colorado Rockies. Corey Ray. A.J. Puck, Braxton Garrett, couple of decent pitchers there. Cal Quantrill, okay pitcher for the Guardians, right, is where he ended up eventually, if I'm not mistaken. And then there were a couple other guys that ended up working out. Like now it's been 8 years since this draft, but Cole Reagans was the 30th overall selection by the Texas Rangers. He's really good now for the Royals. He was traded last year at the deadline. Other than that, though, man, it was not a good first round. And if that's what this year's class is being compared to, good luck, Cardinals.
The top 41 picks in that draft, only one All-Star.
Wow.
That tells you how thin that draft was.
Here's the worst part, too, for the Cardinals. They pick 7th, and then they don't pick again at number 80.
That might be a blessing in disguise.
Yes, but you better hope you get 7 right.
Yeah.
Because not having a second-round pick means you're not going to be getting a lot of talent and once you get to the next round.
I still think baseball teams should be able to trade in the draft.
Oh, I'm with you.
I'm not saying they should be able to trade picks for players. Like, okay, if you just want to keep the draft and, like, make sure this is a part of
trade picks for
systems,
picks, though.
You should be able to move up and down the board.
Absolutely.
Like the Cardinals should be able to say, hey, we want to move down from 7 because of that qualifying offer that we ended up losing our second-round pick to be able to sign Sonny Gray this offseason. We should be able to move down from 7 to, like, 20 and pick up a second-round pick for doing so. That should, in my opinion, be something that Major League Baseball looks into. They probably never will, but I think it would.
You want to make the draft more exciting? You have that availability to you, and make the deadline more exciting. Those draft picks available.
You can trade the comp picks now. That's something that teams can do. You just can't trade the actual picks.
Hopefully the picks are the next step with it.
Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. I've got an update on why Ollie Marmol is handling his pitching staff the way that they are right now as well. We'll get into that next. You're on 101 ESPN. If you want to play some action on the Cardinals for today, the doubleheader that they've got going on against the Atlanta Braves, the place to do so is on the Circa Sportsbook app in Illinois. Alex, the reason why is because you're just going to get better odds. You look over on FanDuel. It might sound small, but this stuff over the long run can be a really big deal. Later on this afternoon, if you wanted to bet on the Cardinals straight up in game number 1 with Kyle Gibson on the mound, it's plus 104 over on FanDuel. It's plus 106 if you bet on the exact same thing over on Circa. Reason why that matters, you're winning a couple extra bucks if you bet $100. Later on tonight, plus 105 if you bet on the Cardinals to beat the Braves over on Circa. It's plus 102 on FanDuel. That's just one of many things that you can bet on over on the Circa Sports app. If you want to bet on some of the futures, you're going to get better odds on that over on Circa as well. For example, if you wanted to bet on the Braves over on Circa, 5-1 odds to win the National League. On FanDuel, it's plus 450. Alex, this is why we bet on Circa.
Yeah, and those futures that BK's talking about, maybe golf's more your cup of tea. Well, the Open is coming up in a couple of weeks. You can hit some futures on that. And why I love Circa is because when you do those futures, you're not getting limited based off of the winnings. Every player has the same limits, unlike other sports books that do limit winning players. So make sure you download the right sportsbook app at Circa Sports, Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in right now here on 101 ESPN. But Alex, before we get to that, Jeff Jones has an update from Ollie Marmol on why they are going about things the way they are with their rotation. He tweets, Marmol was asked this morning if the reshuffling of the rotation and the seemingly early hooks on starters are related to a broader maintenance strategy. They are. Here is the entire answer from Ollie Marmol. Quote, it is. In this game, you can question just about anything. That has been a big part of it. If you look at our depth, it's not our strength at the moment, right? That's been talked about enough. So making sure that we stay healthy has to be an emphasis. And how do you do that? You monitor your workload. So yeah, pulling someone at 88 pitches, could they get to 100? Yeah, you could redline them all day long. You got to be careful, though. You just have to be bigger. You have to kind of have the bigger picture in mind of what you are, what you have, and what you, worst case scenario, end up looking like. And what is the best way to get there? It's by overusing these guys. So essentially he's saying what we've been talking about now for a couple of weeks, and I think he mentioned this in a post-game media availability after one of the Sonny Gray starts where he said, hey, listen, we need this guy. Like, we can't lose Sonny Gray. And they're operating accordingly. Now, T-Bone's point on this is they're managing scared. And I think you can make that case, and it's not hard to do so. I think it's also kind of understandable that they're managing scared. Because if you were to lose, specifically Sonny Gray, dude, you're done. Season over. Like, you can just mail it in. If you lose Sonny Gray for 2 months, this team cannot overcome that kind of a loss. Now, does this end up actually helping him stay healthy? I do not know. I don't know. Is there a 10% chance or less that he gets hurt if he's going 7 fewer pitches in every outing and not having him go out there for another inning the other day when it's 100 degrees outside? I don't know. They clearly believe the answer to that question is, even if it's not 10%, it's some percentage, and they're willing to live with that. So this is the way they're going to operate for a while probably. And I do think it's interesting that they are acknowledging just how thin they are on the pitching side of things. This is a cry for help. He's saying, Mo, you got to do something for me to be able to manage this team differently. Yep. Right now, there's no way he can do that.
And that's why you can't blame Ollie for this. And I know a lot of people go straight to Ollie. This ain't him. He's doing what he can, and it frustrates people. It frustrates us of pulling Sonny Gray at 80 pitches. But until the front office goes out there and adds more to a team that needs depth, I don't blame Ollie for managing this way. I mean, Ollie's trying to manage for success. He's trying to manage for his job. You got to go out there and do it the best of your ability, and that's on Mo and the front office to make moves. And when they don't go get somebody at the deadline, or they get some middle of the order or middle of the rotation dude who's probably not going to help you that much, that's when people start bashing on Ollie. And I think there's one way to look, and it's the front office.
Yeah, I get it. I still don't like it. And to me, it is still managing scared. And I don't think you can do that when you are where the Cardinals are, which is the muddy middle of the National League. You know,
I think you have to do it, though, if you want to make the playoffs. If your front office isn't going to go get you depth, you have to do it.
I think there'd be more of an argument that you have to push the guys more if you want to make the playoffs, because you're not in a spot where you're the Philadelphia Phillies or the LA Dodgers where you are kind of coasting through the regular season and kind of say, all right, let's manage. We're playing the long game. Regular season doesn't really matter to us. We're playing for October. The Cardinals got to get to October to play in October. And that's where where I would push back and say that this is kind of managing scared, even though I totally understand what he is saying and that they lack depth. But I still think that you cannot be continuously saying, okay, our pitcher's going to go 80 pitches. We need to go to a bullpen game because we need to get guys time off. I just don't think you can operate like that till even the trade deadline. I understand what he is saying, and yes, their depth, it sucks. It does. They don't have a lot of pitching down in AAA. But you cannot manage this way, in my opinion, because as you saw in the game against the Giants, it can backfire to where Sonny Gray was clearly the best pitcher out there, could have gone another inning, could have saved some bullpen innings for your bullpen arms as well. And instead, you go to the bullpen and it almost bites you back in the butt. He got lucky and he got away with it that game.
Yeah, I give a lot more grace in this scenario than T-Bone does. The other day I was with Tanner, but that was really the first time that I felt that way. Otherwise, I think most of his decisions have made a lot of sense. I thought the other day it was the first time where I was like, I don't love that. Don't love that decision. And it did almost come back to bite them. Somebody on the text line said, guys, then how do you explain why the Cardinals continue using the same 3 relievers over and over and over again? I know it feels that way. It's not necessarily true. if you look at the Cardinals relievers and where they rank in terms of total batters faced, right? Look at how often they are facing a new batter. They have 0 in the top 32 in Major League Baseball in terms of relief pitchers that are going out there. Ryan Helsley has faced the most batters on the Cardinals out of their bullpen so far this year. He has faced 147 batters so far this year. He's 33rd in Major League Baseball. Ryan Fernandez is 40th. Andrew Kittredge is 47th. Jojo Romero is 70th in Major League Baseball in total batters faced so far this year. Now, they're getting through a bunch of innings because very few batters end up getting on against them. That's a big part of this, is they're getting 3 outs for the most part relatively quickly, and that helps them get in and out of games. So yes, by appearances, to some degree, they're up there. I mean, you look at it right now, and Andrew Kittredge is 15th in Major League Baseball in appearances. Helsley is 30th, and so is Jojo Romero. They both have 35 appearances on the season. But if you're looking at workload, which is more important than appearances, they aren't as high as what it would otherwise feel like, given when you look at how many batters they're actually facing. So keep that in mind as you're looking at their workload overall. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 314, guys, I never hear you talk about some of the bigger moves that the Cardinals could make at the deadline. Do you see any that make sense for them? Not really.
Yeah, we don't talk about it because we all know it's not going to happen.
And to be honest, I don't know what the big move would be this year.
Crochet.
You know, I guess Crochet, but like I kind of like Jordan Walker still, so... And honestly, I don't think Crochet's getting traded. Like, I know he's the talk of the town, and everybody seems to think that the White Sox are going to move him. I still would be shocked if the White Sox move Crochet due to all the control that he has. So there's no real big name, in my opinion. That's like in years past when, like, Scherzer was available. It's like, whoa, imagine if the Cardinals got Max Scherzer. I just don't think that guy's there this year.
All right, from the 314, guys, what do you think about Tommy Edman spraining his ankle? Did you see this?
That sucks.
Seems about right for the Cardinals.
What a tough year. What a year from hell for Tommy Edman.
Especially because you were going to be
one of the best dudes, too. Like, I know that we'll talk plenty about baseball, really, what this means baseball-wise, and it sucks for him and for the team. But Tommy Edman's one of the best dudes in that clubhouse. Like, legitimately one of the best guys to talk to all the time. Super thoughtful, really nice guy. You'll never hear a bad thing about him. This sucks, dude. Just brutal. And we've all sprained an ankle at some point. I don't know how severe it is. The Cardinals don't know how severe it is. But you don't typically just get better immediately after spraining your ankle, especially not when you play a position as athletically important as center field. That's tough, man.
Especially for a guy that was moving into a role that was an everyday role that you were about to be able to carve out, you know, a long-term future at that position. You know, he started as the utility guy, you get shortstop, and then you get second, and now you get moved to a spot that you were going to carve out. Like, hey, I'm the everyday center fielder, and then this happens. This is never fun.
From the 314, guys, what do you think Lars Nootbaar's role will be when he gets back? Is he immediately your starting everyday left fielder again? I think so.
I'd say he's your starting everyday right fielder.
Yeah, right fielder.
Because I'd have Donnie in left and I'd DH Burley.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, and I think he hits probably cleanup when he comes back.
Whoa.
I don't know if I feel good about it, but I think he does. I would go win one. All he likes to go left, right, or right, left, right, left.
Is it crazy to put him two? I know Burleson's been having a ton of success there. Is it crazy to put him two?
I'd stick with Burley just because he's hitting the ball so well. Once he cools off, I'd move him back up there just because he gets on base. The reason I say that, and this is old school, but like the contact thing, I kind of like Burleson batting a little lower, whereas I would have Nootbaar with the on-base percentage going
I think
second.
if somebody doesn't emerge, I'd like to see Alec Burleson either in a 3-hole or a 5-hole.
Yeah,
because you're talking about having guys on. Now, Contreras...
I like Wynn, Newt, Contreras, Burleson.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
I just want your hottest hitter hitting in the 2 spot. And right now it's Alec Burleson.
That's
so
fair.
until he cools off, then we'll go from there. And then I'll adjust the lineup. But right now I would stick with Burley.
Or when Lars Nootbaar heats up.
It just feels kind of weird to have Nootbaar lower. No? Just because
if Nootbaar heats up, I think that's a great way to go.
On base.
To your point on that, like his value's on base, but right now, like to me, you don't even have a cleanup hitter. Like who's the cleanup hitter you feel comfortable with right now? Like I know Goldie's been playing better, but I still don't feel comfortable with him as the 4 hitter, and I'm hitting Contreras 3. Maybe you go Nootbaar 3 and have him get on base for Contreras.
Contreras needs to be your cleanup hitter. Right now it should be Contreras or Burleson.
Yeah, I I don't know what they do when Nootbaar comes back. I would still stick with Burley at the 2 spot just because Wynn and Burley are 2 hottest hitters right now. And, like, within 2 at-bats, you can have a run on the board already.
I like the way it's looked, that's for sure. He's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Speaking of that batting order, Nolan Arenado lower in this batting order today than he has been in any batting order as a starter in a decade. Is that a sign of things to come or just a one-off because of the injuries? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Nolan Arenado batting 6th in the lineup for the Cardinals in this first game of the doubleheader with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. Alex, the last time that Nolan Arenado started a game and was hitting 6th or lower in the batting order, July 11th of 2014.
T-Bone wasn't even alive then.
It's been almost exactly 10 years since Nolan Arenado has hit this low in the order as a starter. The question, I think, is this. Is this a one-off, or is this something that is going to become more of the norm for Nolan Arenado until or unless he starts hitting better than he has so far. Here's what Ollie Marmol had to say about that yesterday prior to the game. Quote, "We've had conversations. Nolan is ready to contribute. It's not a hang-up for him or anything like that. It may be like this for one day. I'm not committed to the order of this line by any means," end quote. That's a lot of words that said not very much. He essentially said, I'm not committing to either thing. Him hitting higher, him hitting lower, or him hitting at number 6 in the order long term. Alex, what would be your projection on what Arenado's future holds in terms of where he hits in the order?
That this is a facade and it's not real. That he's there today because you want to see what it looks like, but Arenado is going to be back into, I don't know if it's going to be that cleanup spot, but I think Arenado will be back into the top 5 sooner rather than later. I think you're doing this right now because you've got a lot of guys with a hot bat, Donovan, Burleson, Wynn, and you want to get them up there with guys on base. But at some point, you're going to look at it and say what T-Bone and I have always said, you got to get Arenado right. And I don't view this as something where Ollie's just going to slowly move him down the lineup. I think it's going to be a veteran player that is going to be back into your top 5 sooner rather than later. And you're going to brag about the depth of your lineup behind Nolan Arenado when Nootbaar and all of these guys are back.
Yeah, and I don't want to call it a fear because it would be the best case scenario if Arenado could get going. But my fear is that there's going to be like what we've seen before, where it's like a 2-game stretch where like, wow, that looks like the Nolan Arenado of new, or the old Nolan Arenado. And the Cardinals go, all right, back into the cleanup spot we go, or back into the top 5 we go. I don't want to see him back into the top 5 of this order until you can see like a sustained like 2-week stretch of Nolan Arenado of old, to where you're actually seeing him pull the ball, hit for some power, not just relying on like bloop singles and hitting for average. Start to see a little of that slug before you get him back into the top 5. My fear though is the Cardinals are going to go, well, it's Nolan Arenado. That's Nolan Arenado. That's our veteran that we trust. We got to get him back in the top 5. My hope though is that this is Ollie Marmol and the Cardinals coming to the realization of that this season, this is what Nolan Arenado is, and it's time to kind of treat him as such, to where he does have to hit in the bottom 4 of our order. And if that's the case, I think that's the best case scenario for the St. Louis Cardinals right now while he's not hitting, is that he hits anywhere between 6 and 9 in your lineup, and you've got your top 5 hitters, the guys that you see in the lineup today that are actually performing at the plate and are starting to hit for some power and starting to generate some slug. That is what it should look like right now, but I do fear that the Cardinals will be a little too quick and too happy to go back to him in the top 5.
A little bit of news passed along. The Cardinals' first game has been delayed a bit, so due to weather.
This team's in trouble.
Fingers crossed they're able to get this one in, but as of right now, it has been delayed. Start time is still TBD. There's just nothing you can point to with Nolan Arenado to say, this is why it's going to come back around. Nothing. He's not hitting the ball hard. He's not striking out a lot right now. Like, he's not getting unlucky. He's hitting for a little bit of average. His launch angle, I know people hate hearing about it, but the launch angle is kind of where you'd expect it to be. He's just not hitting it hard enough. And when you don't pull the ball in the air and hit it hard for Nolan Arenado, that's a problem, man. And that's where he's at right now at this point. And until that changes, there should be no expectation that this is going to get better. He's hitting the ball on average 85 miles per hour so far this season. For the vast majority of his career, that's been around 89 miles per hour. That's a significant drop, and that's just the average. If you look at like the max exit velo as well, he's way down on that compared to normal. Again, the launch angle, right where you'd expect it to be. His problem is that he's not hitting the ball as hard as often. He's not barreling the ball up even close to where he typically would be. That's the problem for him. And until that changes, you can't put him higher into the order. That's why I mentioned all of that stuff, is because there is no argument that he should be batting above 6th. This is where Nolan Arenado in 2024 deserves to hit for the Cardinals. And honestly, you could argue lower. When Lars Nootbaar returns to this lineup, and he's expected to go on some kind of a rehab assignment starting this weekend, you should have Nolan Arenado batting no higher than 7th in your order, because the following players should be batting ahead of him based upon what they are doing right now. Wynn, Burleson, Contreras, Goldie, Nootbaar, Donovan. Those 6 players are all better hitters today than Nolan Arenado is. And if Nolan Gorman gets hot, he should be batting ahead of him too. This gets really dicey, man. As a manager, you have to bring along a veteran like Nolan Arenado, and it's hard. It's really hard to make this kind of a drastic move. This guy's not been this low in the order since he was like 25 years old. He was like just getting his feet wet into Major League Baseball. Wasn't this version of Nolan Arenado. And he was batting lower in the order. Made sense. Smart move. Let him earn his stripes, right? And then he did, and then boom, he was basically batting cleanup for the next decade. Going back down the other direction is not an easy thing to do. It's why Yadier Molina almost always hit 5th or 6th in the lineup. No matter what his production was, he was just going to bat in one of those two spots, almost no matter who was around him. The Cardinals also very rarely, while Yadi was down in terms of his production, had this many players that were deserving of hitting in front of him. And that's going to be the next test for Ollie Marmol. I think this is a sign of things to come. I'm surprised it happened this quickly. I thought it would take a little bit longer. But now that they're doing this now, I think for the rest of this first half, while he's dealing with some of the soreness with his elbows and stuff, you definitely have him lower in the order. And as we come back, starting out the second half of the season, if he doesn't start producing, I think you'll see him drop quicker than you see him come up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best case scenario for the Cardinals to have him lower, because that means you have guys that are outproducing Arenado. And if Arenado heats up, that lengthens the lineup once again. I always go back to what Gossman said, what was it, last year, going against that Cardinals lineup, saying there's no opportunity to breathe. If you have Gorman slugging the way that you expect him to, if you get Nootbaar back and he's back to what he was prior to the injury, and Wynn, Burleson, Donovan all continue what they're doing, then I want Arenado hitting lower in my lineup, because I think you've got guys that fill roles better suited for the lineup that's right now, with guys that have contact ability, guys that have power ability. And Nolan Arenado is a guy that, if he's right, that's a threat down the bottom of the lineup, too.
Somebody from the 618 said, guys, I think you're overstating the importance of order in the lineup. We've talked about this in the past. We always overstate the importance of what order you're hitting in until it becomes really important. And the most important thing with your batting order, this is what Michael Gersh told us, T-Bone, a couple of years ago. I think it was on the Danny Mac show. Getting your best players the most at-bats possible. That's like, in terms of, hey, is it better to go Wynn, Burleson, Contreras, Goldie, or is it better to go like with Nootbaar lower, or is it better to have Nootbaar above? Get your best guys the most at-bats possible. That should be the goal of your batting order. And that's why it matters with Nolan Arenado. Because putting him above guys that are better than him means that those guys get fewer at-bats, and as the game gets later, the game will find you. And it eventually gets to Nolan Arenado, and the other team right now feels really comfortable in that spot. And that's not where you want to be as a Cardinals team, is getting to a place where Arenado is getting more of those at-bats than Donovan or Nootbaar or Burleson, for example. When Gorman gets hot again, then Gorman, and that's where it becomes really important. But yes, in general, we overstate the importance of a lineup.
Yeah, and really once you get to that 5 spot, I don't think it really... You'll see it sometimes where he'll come up with runners in scoring position. 4 is where it was really killing the Cardinals. When he was hitting in the 4 spot, you would see multiple times where the game would find him. Big spot, runner, 3rd one out, or 2nd and 3rd one out, and he just couldn't come through. For me to buy into what the Cardinals are doing, this is a step in the direction. I think I said it at one point last week or 2 weeks ago of, hey, if you want me to buy in what you're doing, your pitching's been good. It's my question has been, can you win without Goldie and Arenado? Well, now that you're moving Arenado lower in the order, I'm going to find out if you can win without Nolan Arenado being Nolan Arenado. And if they can win while he's hitting in the 6th spot, and really they've been playing well while he hasn't been performing all that well here since Mother's Day, then it's going to be willing for me to say, okay, Ollie Marmol is moving away from his veterans in which he trusts. He's moving them lower in the order, and he's getting the best players the most at-bats. And if that's the case, okay, I can really start to buy into what this offense can potentially be without Nolan Arenado.
So somebody on the text line said, so guys, are you telling me that a couple of at-bats over the course of 162 is really all that important? It can be. When you're in a race like this and these at-bats are that important, yeah, they absolutely can.
Oh, go back and look at the Rockies series. Go back and look at the Marlins series. You lost and tied a series because of a couple of at-bats.
And just for context, right now, your 6-hole hitter has 317 plate appearances so far this year. Your 8-hole hitter has 295. That's an extra 21 plate appearances over the course of 80 games or so. So if you're looking at how that would play out over the course of the season, do I think that 50+ plate appearances, can ultimately determine whether or not the Cardinals end up making the playoffs? Yes. Yes, I do. If those come up in the right situations, that becomes really meaningful. So yes, that's why this stuff matters. Is it the most important thing in the world? Oh, man, what the Cardinals do at the deadline could be way more important. Whether or not these guys that are currently hurt come back healthy and productive, way more important than the batting order. This is like 7th, 8th, 9th type of stuff in terms of the list of important things that the Cardinals need to make sure is right to be able to make the playoffs and then hopefully make a run in the postseason. But it's on the list somewhere. It's on the list. So, yeah, it deserves, 7 minutes of conversation on June 26th, the day after the Cardinals did not play a baseball game. That's pretty much where it belongs on the list of importance. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, there are two huge stories right now in the NHL. Both of them are potential trade candidates. One of them, I was really surprised by the update that we got on it yesterday. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN. The two biggest stories this offseason in the NHL are trade-related. One is at the center of the hockey universe, and that's Mitch Marner. He is one of the best players in the world on the wing, and he's making a boatload of money going into his free agent year. Here's the thing. He's got a no-move clause, so he gets to decide what his outcome is. And it sure seems like, based on all the reporting, the most likely outcome there is that he stays with Toronto for this season. And then he decides what he wants to do next year. The other one, Alex, is one of the two best players on the team that just lost in the Stanley Cup final, Leon Draisaitl, who's heading into his walk year as well. Now, this one is a little more interesting to me because we haven't spent as much time talking about it. I thought he would just, especially after making the Stanley Cup final, he's going to be back, they're going to get the deal done, and we're all just kind of going to go our merry ways. And then I read this yesterday. This comes from Chris Johnston over at The Athletic, one of the most tight-end insiders in the game. Edmonton is not inclined to let the 28-year-old center simply play out the final year of his contract and walk directly into free agency next July, according to multiple league sources. A player of his pedigree seldom, if ever, gets dealt while still in the prime of their NHL career, and he'd command a haul in return. Were the Oilers to go that route, it would be a franchise-defining move geared towards reloading on the roster and time to convince Connor McDavid that his own championship aspirations can still be realized in Edmonton. He went on in the article to explain why this is maybe more possible than some were led to believe going into this offseason. It's all up, essentially, to Leon Draisaitl and what he wants long-term. Alex, do you think this is real? Like, is Leon Draisaitl potentially going to be traded this offseason?
I think it's real. And honestly, if I'm Leon Draisaitl, just as Johnston pointed out that McDavid, it's time for him to realize that his chance to win a Stanley Cup is on him, Leon Draisaitl should be thinking the same thing. I don't know if I want to re-sign with what the future looks like for the Edmonton Oilers. You are already in a cap crunch, and if I'm Draisaitl, you're paying me $13+ million. Like, you are paying me $13.5 to $14 million because I'm a better player than Austin Matthews, and that's what he just got.
I agree.
And if that's the case, then Connor McDavid the next year says, cool, you're paying me $15 million. And now you're sitting at $30 million, a third of the cap space available to you, tied up in two players.
And you got to do it.
You got to do it.
If they say, I want to do it, you say, we'll make it happen.
But if I'm Draisaitl and I'm looking at this, it's not just me and him. Darnell Nurse is making almost $10 million for the next 7 years. Evan Bouchard is going to be getting paid $7+ million. Your goaltender, Stuart Skinner, has 2 more years of making league minimum, or not minimum, but you're making $2.6 million. The future of the Edmonton Oilers is going to be me, McDavid, Bouchard, and Nurse. That's how we're going to have to win a Stanley Cup.
With basically veteran minimum deals around
and a team not drafting very high or having first-round draft picks. So if I'm him, I'm looking at this as, man, you know what? We tried, and we didn't get there. And even listen to Leon Draisaitl's words after the Stanley Cup final. He said, man, now we got to go do this again, and I don't know how tough it's going to be. If I'm him, and also Scotty Upshaw tweeted this out earlier, that Ken Holland sounds like he might be leaving the Oilers and going to the Blackhawks. I think I might want out. I think I might want to look at this and say, I'd like to be moved. I'm not re-signing here in Edmonton. I'd like to be moved somewhere else. So now that I can start my legacy on another team, because I've done this for the last 5 years, and we have been unable to get there. The Stanley Cup final is great, but that's the closest we've gotten in 5 years. I don't know if we're going to get there again. I think I'd like to move elsewhere.
The other thing to keep in mind, and this was like a random piece of this story, but I felt like it was kind of thrown in there for a reason. We know how the sausage is made, Alex, right?
Yeah, we do. In the oven.
So I think that's exactly right.
You don't make the sausage in the oven? He doesn't eat sausage. Sorry, I forgot about that.
When you see lines, kind of like when Ollie said the other day, this was a couple of weeks ago now, we can't lose Sonny. He said that in his post-game press conference for a reason. He said it because if you read between the lines, you can kind of understand what the North Star is for all that's guiding his decisions with when to pull Sonny Gray during games. Well, I'm terrified of losing this guy. That is the North Star for Ollie Marmol. When I read in this piece from Chris Johnston, hey, most of the other stars around the league play with other stars on their line. And there's a decent amount of the time, Alex, where McDavid and Draisaitl are together. Decent amount of the time.
Yeah, that's desperation mode when Edmonton needs goals.
A lot of the time, though, he's playing with Holloway and Kane, or Perry and McLeod, or Fogle and Nugent Hopkins. and that's not quite the same thing. And so I do wonder if he's looking at, like, Colorado, for example, and the situation that they have ready to go for Nathan McKinnon, where it's like, hey, this dude is playing with a star every night on his line. And I wonder if he's saying, man, maybe it's my turn to get one of those dudes on my wing. Well, like, you look at what Toronto has available for them.
Yeah, Matthews is with
gets to play with
Nylander.
a superstar every single night. And again, I understand he's got Connor McDavid, and they do play a decent amount together. But it's not, I've got this guy that is my partner that is on my line at all times, and he's a star.
Yeah, but you're not the star.
He's my winger.
Yeah, you're not the star with McDavid. You're on the wing with the star. And like for Draisaitl, you're always going to be the secondary piece. And some guys, they're fine with that. But if you're Draisaitl, you're never going to be. That's what happens when you're a centerman. When you're a centerman, it's hard to be the guy unless you're putting winger stars with them. But here's the problem. You're not drafting in the top 10, top 12. You don't have cap space to go out there and bring in stars. Like the star that they brought in for him was Evander Kane. And that wasn't going to get it done. So now you're Draisaitl, and now you're piecemealing it together with all of these minor league dudes that are coming up and have some highly touted prospect status, but it's not going anywhere. That's why, if you're Draisaitl, if I'm Draisaitl, I'm looking at this and saying, man, we just got the closest we were probably ever going to get to winning a Stanley Cup, because all of these contracts are not going to be as feasible next year or in the next 2 years as they are now. Is it time for me to go be the Connor McDavid on another team that needs a $14 million player that wants to put other younger pieces around me?
And also that I get to play with a star at all times.
Well,
it's not occasionally I get to be on Connor McDavid's line. It's I am on a line every single night with another star.
Yeah.
And I get to set him up, and he gets to set me up, and we get to play together, and we get to build the chemistry, and it's just, we're going to go do this thing together. Like, you look at what they have in Colorado, that is the way that it is set up, dude. Those guys are together all the time. You look at the way that it is set up for Vegas. Their stars play together on the same line over and over and over again. So I think that's something to keep in mind as you see what is available out there. Look at the Panthers, right? Like, they had the same lines that were always together over the entirety of the season. I do think that is something that I would imagine is going through his mind right now, not because I previously had thought of that, but when I saw it in that article, I was like, that's in there for a reason. You don't just randomly write, hey, other stars play with stars, and Leon Draisaitl mostly doesn't. I would keep an eye on, it's why I read the tweet from Scotty Upshaw, keep an eye on, and I know Blues fans ain't going to like this, the Chicago Blackhawks. Because if Ken Holland goes there, who has been the general manager since 2019 in Edmonton, a team that has a ton of cap space, has a ton of young players, and you've already got Connor Bedard. Boy, if you're Leon Draisaitl and you want to build a legacy and have your shot at winning a cup, that team could turn it around very quick with $30+ million available to them. Do they have the assets, though? I think that's where it gets really hard, is if you're going to make a move like this, you have to go all in. It has to be a haul, man. The deal that it will be compared to is the Tkachuk deal, but it will be for more.
But here's the problem. If a team knows that Leon Draisaitl is not re-signing with Edmonton, like Calgary did with Matthew Tkachuk, how much of a haul can you really get? Like, you got Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar. It's a haul.
Sure.
But if I'm a team and I know he's not re-signing in Edmonton, at some point, and he's got a no movement clause.
I mean, it's going to be very few teams that he's willing to listen to. It would probably be similar in this regard to the Tkachuk deal, where he basically gave them a list of like 5 teams and said, here, you can negotiate with these 5 teams. I'm willing to extend with any of them. You get the best offer for you. And I would imagine something similar will happen with Draisaitl, where he says, and it might be one, he may end up saying, I'm willing to sign with this team, get something done with him. And if that happens, dude, you are... Good luck if you're Edmonton. But that is the worst case scenario for you.
But if you're Edmonton, the haul, yes, you want a lot in return, but the haul is also you opening up the cap space, because then you're able to spend it in other places that you haven't been able to spend it, but you're losing one of the best players, second best player.
Said, I want to play in St. Louis.
Mike Liut's his agent, so I'm just going to throw that one out there.
I love Toasted Ravs.
The Arch, the free zoo.
I mean, it's
Cardinals baseball.
It's the place that I've always wanted to play.
Yeah, I do that. I do that, man.
What if you're in Army's shoes and you say, okay, we got to have a meeting with this. Steiner, come on in. The rest of my inner circle, come on in.
Ken Hitchcock, former Oilers head coach.
What are we willing to offer?
Look at my team.
What is the best trade that we can possibly offer to the Edmonton Oilers?
Look at my team and pick your poison.
All right, well, we want your first round pick.
Thomas and Kyrou.
Yeah.
Sure.
Really?
I wouldn't give up Thomas for him.
I don't know if they'd want Thomas, to be honest with you, because they're looking.
$8 million. That's a great deal for them.
It is a great.
Too talented.
No. I mean, I guess you would, but like if you're losing Draisaitl,
Parayko, Thomas, and Booch.
Sure.
Really?
Sure.
Really?
It's freaking Leon Draisaitl, man. He's 28 years old. Like Robert Thomas, I love the guy. Never going to be Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, this is one of those things where like guys that are typically considered to be untouchable suddenly are no longer
And if I got to be
untouchable.
honest with you, I don't believe they would want Colton Parayko because they've got Colton Parayko and Darnell Nurse. They wouldn't want, to me, I think they would want Kyrou more than Thomas because you need goal scoring on the wings. You've got the McDavids.
Kyrou would be amazing with McDavid, by the way.
I mean, anybody would be.
I know, but he like fits the style perfectly.
Tanner thinks he could do anything. He could score 70 goals with Connor McDavid.
I could. I'd go stand there and I'd go, Connor, just bring me the puck, my man.
I mean, honestly, you pick your poison off of this roster and let me know what you want for Leon Draisaitl. But you also got to know that you're paying him $14 million probably.
Benner?
Yeah. I love Benner, but yeah. There's not an untouchable on this team for Leon Draisaitl.
This is going to sound weird.
You going to keep Benner over Draisaitl?
Are we overcorrecting from the Kachuk whiff?
Like
That one was a lot easier to get done, though.
I think I wouldn't offer Benner. And the reason why is because if I get Draisaitl and I've lost Benner, let's say it's like Benner, Kyrou, and Parayko, something like that. Okay, so I've got Draisaitl, which is amazing at $15 million, and that's awesome. What about the rest of my team? Now I'm basically just like one of these other teams that we see wasting away in the middle of the NHL where I've got a superstar, but I don't have the goaltending to be a real contender. And now I'm just always searching.
But you think you have the goaltending.
The New Jersey Devils.
But you think you have the goaltending in Joel Hofer. That's why you at least consider
I have
it.
no idea if that dude can do it in the playoffs.
You don't, but
Let alone not just the playoffs, but when he's the number one.
And see, like, goaltending's not the problem in this scenario, even if you move Benner, because now you're relying more on your defense to be better. Like, Bennington can get away with this bad defense.
Problem.
But that's what I mean. Like, you've got $15 million now or $14 million for Draisaitl. How are you going to fix your defense? Because defense is the exact same. You got to fix that, which means there's more money going that direction. Like, there is a trickle-down effect.
Yeah, I don't think the Blues are in a position to trade for Draisaitl, is what I'm saying.
I think it sets you back more than it kind of propels you forward.
It sounds crazy because we're talking about Leon freaking Draisaitl and we've got the opportunity to add that guy and he says, I want to play there. Like, you probably got to find a way to do it. But I don't know if it's in the Blues' best interest to give up what it would require in order to make such a move happen. Now, none of that matters because it's not happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not happening.
But I just find it to be an interesting kind of theoretical of what would you be willing to offer there? I don't think the Blues are constructed in a way that makes it possible to make that kind of a move. And this goes back to what Arby's always said, where they've got the pack mentality and stuff like the deals that are on their books, the way they've constructed their roster money-wise and in terms of how they play stylistically, just doesn't really make sense in that regard. And Matthew Tkachuk was the one that made sense for every possible reason. He fit with everything they wanted to do. This one I don't think actually does.
Yeah.
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex is ready to risk it all. He'll just throw it all out there.
I like
Coming
your
up
aggressive
Need to pump the brakes, I guess.
You like your favorite team, the Golden Knights.
I love Leon Draisaitl, though. I think Leon
He's
Draisaitl is just as good as Connor McDavid in a different way. And I know he went 9 games without scoring a goal. I think he was injured.
Not a winner.
Well, I could say the same thing about Connor McDavid. So,
You say the same thing about Kachuk outside of the winner part.
But you know who's a winner? Benner. And I'm building around him.
well, I mean, his name rhymes with it, so why wouldn't you? But like, I think you don't make centermen that are like 6'4", 200-something pounds that have that dangerous of a shot.
And that are 28 years
And he's 28 years old.
That's the craziest part is that he's still really young. By the end of his next 8-year contract, he'll probably finally be out of his prime.
And, dude, I got so many great years out of it. It's worth it.
Coming up next, do the Cardinals deserve criticism for failing to see that the pitching revolution was coming in 2008? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care, taking care of your HVAC system. They have been making people comfortable for a long time here in St. Louis, since 1926. And I just went through this. My HVAC system went out over the weekend. I called Classic Air Care. They were out Monday morning looking at it. And yes, we got to go down the path now of purchasing a new HVAC system. But Mike was out. He walked me through the entire process, explained what we need, what you don't need, and told me that they could be out there this week to install the HVAC system. You get that great customer service with Classic Air Care. And if you don't believe me, check out the hundreds of reviews that are up on their Google+. It's a 4.8 rating. This one from Roy. Always on time when scheduled. Knowledgeable technicians who explain what needs to be done honestly and clearly. They do the work quickly as they can, but always carefully and completely. Easy to have them in the house. So make sure you give them a call today if you're having HVAC problems. If you want to make sure you can get through this hot summer, or if you're in the market for a new HVAC system, check them out online. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. It's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Terry Henderson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals were rained out yesterday, and they are having a doubleheader today with the Atlanta Braves. And the first game was supposed to start at 12:45, but they are currently in another rain delay. Their expected start time for Game 1 of the doubleheader is currently 1:30 here Central Time. Kyle Gibson on the mound for St. Louis. Ronaldo Lopez will get the start for the Atlanta Braves. Game 2 of the doubleheader will be at 6:15 tonight. Matthew Liberatore will get the start for the St. Louis Cardinals. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, we've got the first round of the NBA draft, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock. This Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, so the Cardinals had one of the best pitching coaches in Major League Baseball on their staff before anybody else did. This was back in the Tony La Russa era, and Alex, he came in under Jeff Lunau with Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson on Brandon Kiley.
This is going to go well.
Is doing a really interesting series this week on missing bats, and they've had 3 parts to this so far. And it's basically, why did we arrive where we're at today? Why did the game go from being so contact-oriented and pitchers, it was all sinkers and sliders, right? Down and away, down and away, down and away. And how did we go from that to, in basically a decade's time, everybody agreeing the strikeout is king, go for the strikeouts, fastball up, slider away. We are now creating different pitches. Technology has accordingly increased in a way where you can get instant feedback on every pitch that you've thrown, and guys are creating pitches that model best in tunnel, like all of this different stuff. And it was rejected for the first 5 to 7 years that it was out there for most Major League Baseball teams, but not all. The Cardinals, unfortunately, were one of the teams that completely rejected it. And they had a pitching coach down in their minor league system who eventually went to Houston with Jeff Lunau. His name was Brent Strom, and he is now with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Again, he is arguably the best pitching coach currently in the game. And when he's with the Cardinals, this is a story that he recalls from back in 2008. He said there was this meeting that we had with some of the people from inside of the organization, coaches. Somebody asked, does anybody know what the batting average is on fly balls? Does anybody know what the batting average is on ground balls? And Strom says that the official then informed the room that the Major League average was 222 on ground balls and 417 on fly balls. Strom responded by saying, that's bull bleep. And
philosophical differences are coming.
It continued from there, and he said, well, why are you guys including line drives as fly balls? Those are 2 very different types of hits, 2 very different types of batted balls. And he said that in 2008, Major League batters actually hit 222 on fly balls and pop-ups. On ground balls, they were at 241. Line drives were the problem. Guys hit 728 on line drives. So it's about missing bats. He said, you're not trying to get guys on the ground as opposed to in the air. What you're trying to do is miss bats because then you have a 0 batting average. So this was his theory at the time. It ended up working out. He goes with Jeff Lunau. They go to Houston. We know the story from there. They win World Series and become one of the most modern baseball teams in every sense of the word, including cheating and pushing the line to a place where it no longer worked for them.
Man, should have cheated.
He goes on and says, basically his experience within the Cardinals organization was a lot of pushback, a lot of, no, we do this. This is our organizational philosophy. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up from this article, again, it's over at The Athletic. It's breaking down how we arrived where we are with the strikeouts reigning supreme in Major League Baseball. This is a time from basically 2008 to 2013 when everything was revolutionized around the game and teams started using this and incorporating it in a big way from 2013 to where we are today. I don't know that I would necessarily give a lot of criticism for the Cardinals failing to adjust at that time. Now, I think they deserve a ton of criticism for not doing so after that. Failing to adjust after 2016 and beyond, I can't even begin to describe how much of a failure that is when you see all of the information around you suggesting these other teams have completely passed you by. How are you not seeing what is happening around you when everybody else is jumping on board? That is a failure of colossal extent. 2008, 2013, the Cardinals were one of the most successful teams in Major League Baseball, man. They went to multiple World Series. They went to the NLCS another time, won a World Series, and their pitching staff was really freaking good from top to bottom. Their model was working. You look at the conveyor belt of pitchers that they had coming up from 2013 to like 2017. Dude, it was one after the other, after the other, after the other, and all of them were pretty good at a minimum. So I don't blame them for missing out early on because they saw the results still of what they had been doing previously. I'm curious for you guys. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. And for Alex and T-Bone, how do you feel when you read a piece like this that is not specifically critical of the Cardinals, but it references a time at which the Cardinals could have adjusted and we'd probably be talking very differently about them today if they had, and they chose not to?
It's not that I criticize them at that time, because you're right. Like, I can't criticize a team that wins a World Series, gets back to another World Series, and just consistently is really, really good. But to get to point Z, you have to get to point X and Y. And it felt like the Cardinals weren't willing to get to point X, which would transition to the next one, which would get them to where we're at now. And I think that's why we're here. Like, yes, you missed that window where everybody was revolutionizing it as of late, and now look at where you're at. But it felt like because the Cardinals were having so much success then, they were unwilling to listen to making trends and changes towards what the league was going towards. And you got stuck in the mud so backwards that you couldn't catch up with everyone else in the major league. So yes, you had success, but you were unwilling to listen to the changes that were coming, and now you fell so far behind that it's impossible for you to catch back up with everybody. So that's where I feel like the criticism is at least justifiable, because yes, you were crushing it in that window. But while baseball was saying, hey, we need to start making some changes, you said, no, we're good. We don't need to make changes. And then while baseball was already in the midst of the changes, you're like, yeah, we should probably make changes, but it's still working for us. And then when it significantly make a shift, you were like, well, now we got nothing in the minors, and now we got to start throwing money at these guys because now we need to start doing something, and it just completely wiped you away.
Yeah, the reason I would be a little bit more critical of them, and it's not so much what they did at the major league level, because at the major league level that was working, but how do you not see that revolution and start to dabble a little bit in the minor leagues? You know, how do you not start to kind of go, okay, we're having this work with this contact, we're doing this well, AAA, major leagues, we've got that kind of turning out. Let's start to work on that next wave. You know, let's start to work on that next wave that we're drafting and trying to develop and trying to somewhat implement this swing and miss, and let's see if that works. And they didn't do that. They were too late to getting to that point. And just when you see the numbers from what Brent Strom was saying there, okay, so I can have a 222 batting average on a ground ball, 222 on a fly ball, 700 on a line drive, which isn't good. It's a 0 batting average on a strikeout. Nobody's ever struck out and got to first base, unless it's like a pitch that's in the dirt or something. But I don't know how you could ever look at that.
I love baseball. That's such a great.
I don't know. I don't know how you could look at that and go, well, we don't need swing and miss. And I understand that everything was working for you, but that is a number-based. That is a statistic telling you, hey, the strikeout is super important, and you should be trying to develop that. So that's where I would be a little bit more critical of them. It's not like in hockey, for example. How did the Blues get kind of stuck with the defensive core that they have? Well, they thought the way that the NHL was moving was puck-moving defensemen, was shorter stature, offensive-minded defensemen that are puck movers. Sure. There wasn't really much of a statistic that showed, like, hey, this is what everybody should be doing because this really works. It was more of a feel of, like, wow, that Adam Fox guy is really good. Wow, that guy in Vancouver, why am I drawing a blank? Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes, thank you. That guy's really good. But there wasn't a, significant statistic that said that will work compared to here in baseball where it was, hey, the strikeout, that will work every single time and we'll make sure that no one gets on base.
So a lot of people are saying, like, guys, what's old is new again, and this is not like a new thing in Major League Baseball. You can point to guys over the past that had really gone after the strikeout as well, and that, sure, there's some truth to that. What's different is the amount of information that is now available for guys. When these guys are throwing bullpens at spring training, for example, there's data that's immediately available to them after every pitch that they have thrown. So a guy throws a pitch, right? He knows immediately what the horizontal break is, what the vertical break is, what the spin rate was on that pitch, and a bunch of different data, that velocity, all these different things. That was not the case as recently as 10 years ago, right? And for the Cardinals, it wasn't the case as recently as 5. They are way behind the times when it comes to a lot of the technology that they've been able to incorporate. And technology on pitching is far ahead of technology with hitting. And so they incorporated the hitting stuff first and then eventually got around to the pitching side of things because, honestly, a lot easier on the hitting side of things, according to what we know publicly that is available. So when you have all of this data that's available to you, it's about how do you use it? Okay, so we've got this information, right? When you get into, you're researching something for an essay in college, you've got all this information that you've been able to accumulate. All right, now you have to write the story. Now it has to become a narrative form. That's essentially where the Cardinals were lacking. Is like, okay, so we've got all this information. What do we do with it? How do we implement it? And all these other teams were taking that, deciphering it, and saying, okay, this is how we can utilize it for scouting, for like college, minor league scouting. This is how we can utilize it to incorporate things into, okay, these are the pitches that our guys are best at. Have them throw them more often. And this is one place that I will give the Cardinals credit for now, is they are actually implementing some of these philosophies into their current pitching philosophy.
That boy, Dusty Blake.
And I think...
Sorry, too late to the party, man.
Some of this is coming, I would imagine, from Chaim Bloom. So when you look at what the Cardinals have done this year with the bullpen, we're all in agreement. Cardinals, good bullpen this year, right? Especially compared to expectations.
Yep.
Yeah.
They are throwing their slider more often than any other team in Major League Baseball is throwing anything other than a fastball. If you look at the top 15 pitches in terms of, you go to the entire bullpen, what is the most common pitch that they throw within any individual bullpen? For 15 of them, like the most common pitch in Major League Baseball for any bullpen is the Chicago White Sox, throwing a four-seam fastball.
They should probably get away from that.
No,
They're doing it 19% of the time overall in their bullpen.
Those
and then
players
it's
just gave up.
Washington, Colorado, Cincinnati, Chicago Cubs, San Diego, Cleveland, a bunch of teams that are throwing a bunch of four-seam fastballs. And then there's a couple teams that are really sinker-heavy, San Francisco, Milwaukee. The Cardinals are the top team in Major League Baseball at throwing something other than a certain category of fastball, and it's their slider. They're throwing the slider out of the bullpen almost 14% of the time overall. This is modern pitching. I'm not telling everybody that they got to like it, but what the Cardinals have done is they are now chasing strikeouts. And the sliders, a lot of them are of the sweeper category, are getting the swing and miss that the Cardinals have been looking for. They're getting the chase that the Cardinals are looking for. And there's a lot of good that can come out of that. Andrew Kittredge, for example, he has the highest chase rate in Major League Baseball. And when he gets somebody to chase, there's two things that can happen. One, they swing and miss. Or two, when you're chasing out of the zone, generally speaking, you're going to put that on the ground. It's going to be a soft hit contact because you're not getting the barrel to it. And it becomes really difficult for a guy to get an extra base hit against you. So it's either just rolling over it and boom, now you've got an out quickly, or you're getting a swing and miss, both of which are good outcomes for a pitcher. So that's what the Cardinals have done a much better job of this year, is they are prioritizing some of this stuff. Credit where it's due. They're starting to catch up. It just took them a decade, man. It took them 10 years to get here, and now they're so far behind. It takes a long time to get to a place where you're actually caught up with both the major league level and what you're doing down in the minor leagues.
And I think it's something you have to learn from your mistakes. So next time when you start to see trends that need to be addressed, you address it early. Even if you're having some success, you have to address them early, because otherwise you just get stuck so far behind. And that's what feels like the last 5 years have been for the Cardinals. You've always been chasing your tail, which is impossible to do if you're in the major leagues, because you have to have a consistent development pipeline that keeps churning guys out. It's like what the Dodgers have done. It's what the Rays have done. The Braves have done. You've got to keep churning these guys, because when you fall behind, now you're discussing what do we need to do, and you're 3 years behind the rest of the league.
He's Alex Ferrario, that's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we'll get into the Cardinals' checklist on where they fall into this year's trade deadline. Do they meet the criteria of a legitimate buyer? We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. Junk Drawer is coming up next here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into the junk drawer. I've got a story for you, Alex. I want to know what your response would have been to this if you were in the same restaurant as this man.
I know. Probably anger.
I don't think so. Disgust might have been up there. All right, so an American Journal of Medicine case reports that a 63-year-old was recovering from surgery at the time that he went to a diner. He goes to this diner, he's eating his meal. He has a history of prostate cancer. Now, he's been dealing with some, he's been getting better, he's recovering, but he's got a wound.
Oh, boy.
It's in his abdomen. It's healing. As far as he knows, from earlier in that day, everything's going well. He goes to his doctor, they say, you're healing well, everything's looking good. He sneezes. Clearly, he didn't have jerks like you guys that would try to stop him from sneezing.
These jerks would have clearly saved him from something.
Also, I can sneeze when somebody tells me not to.
Yeah,
I can perform under pressure.
It's not a skill I have.
Yeah, we know.
So he sneezes. He then coughs. The staples that were binding the wound together apparently came out a little bit.
Oh.
It gets worse.
Got in the food, didn't it?
No.
It exploded on the person sitting behind him.
He looks down, has a wet sensation, pain in his lower abdomen, and he sees parts of his bowels protruding from his body.
Nice.
Oh, God.
Nice. His bowels or his intestines?
Yes.
It's like poop. Poop is coming out of his body.
Are coming out of his body.
Oh,
yes.
That's like a Quentin Tarantino film. What would I do? I would leave the restaurant. I would leave the restaurant.
At the restaurant.
I would.
What do you do in this
Probably
spot?
drop a lot of F-bombs and leave the restaurant. That's disgusting.
I'd call for help, and then I'd leave.
Yeah. I honestly.
He ended up calling the ambulance. They get there, and they gave him some ibuprofen. Said, hey, man,
He may need
we're
something
going
a
to
little
get you to the
stronger than
hospital.
that.
Everything's going to be okay.
I don't think so, man. My intestines are out right
Got
now.
him back inside, and they say now this is a really good case for doctors to be able to study because previously that was not seen to be something that there was a lot of risk for, and now doctors know, hey, if you don't get this sewn up correctly,
That had to be
your intestines could fall out.
That had to be a really big cough for like him to completely.
Here's the thing, though.
Like the more I'm thinking about it, like because I've
It was
had
a sneeze, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, there was a sneeze and then coughing.
I
Okay, the
sneeze like
sneeze
that.
I could see.
A
The sneeze I could
That's
see.
how I sneeze, loud and obnoxious.
Him too, if he can perform.
Yeah.
This would be mortifying.
Now, here's the real question:
You're in public, like it's worse for the guy.
do you push it? Do you push it back in?
So he said he was scared.
Do you touch it?
He didn't know what to do.
I wouldn't
He said
touch
he
Yeah, I
thought
would.
about leaving the restaurant and driving himself to the hospital.
Well, yeah, but then your intestines fall out when you stand up.
That's what he said. He's like, I was scared that if I would stand up, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like, could this be problematic?
Waiter, my large intestine is in my plate. I'd like a new plate, please.
Dude, if you're the server and he says, hey, man, I need you to call 911. I can't move right now. My small intestine is currently leaking out of my stomach.
Prove it. That's how I respond. Prove it.
Oh, my God,
I probably would
man.
have called 911 and then I would tell my boss, I quit. I'm not getting paid enough for this.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. Well, the guy's fine now, but just know in your future, if you do
Don't
shoot
stand
up,
up.
don't sneeze. Have
Yeah.
jerks like these two that will make sure that doesn't happen for you. Yeah, don't stand up. Call the.
This is why I always separate myself when I'm out to eat. You know, you gotta make sure there's tables in between because I don't need somebody's large intestine falling out while I'm eating my soup.
Coming up
Good
next,
feeling it won't happen.
where do the Cardinals fit into the checklist of being a buyer at this year's trade deadline, and who are some of the top players that could be available? There were some executives that were asked about that earlier today. The Athletic had the list for you. We'll tell you about it next year on 101 ESPN. It's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. I was over there earlier today. I go to the town and country location. Super easy, convenient for me. We're in Creve Coeur, just a quick 10, 15-minute drive over there. I went over there to get my my consult today. Previously, about a week or two ago, went in there. They did my lab draw, so that way I find out, okay, where are my numbers at? It turns out my numbers mostly okay, but I did find out I'm a little low on vitamin D. I'm a little low on vitamin B12, and they were able to hook me up over there. I got all the supplements that I need to be able to unlock my inner champion, and you can do the exact same thing by booking now. Go to victorymenshealth.com for great locations across the St. Louis area. It's a super easy process. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them a little bit about where you're at in your journey of trying to unlock your inner champion. They'll be able to help you out over there at Victory Men's Health. While I was there, did another lab draw because I wanted to find out what's my micronutrient level look like. They'll be able to give you all of those numbers as well. You come back and they'll read it all off for you and help you find out exactly what you need to do. Again, you're unlocking your inner champion at Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. All right, so where do the Cardinals fit into the checklist of being a buyer at the trade deadline? With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Steve Phillips was on MLB Network the other day, and he was talking about what he used to do when he was a general manager. And he would say, okay, where are we at as a team? These are the questions you've got to ask yourself first before you can determine exactly what you should do at the deadline. Some of these feel pretty obvious, but, we can go through the checklist with you, all right? How are the standings sorting out in favor or against your team? Alex, right now, when I look at where the Cardinals are at in the standings, it suggests just, again, exclusively looking at where they are at in the standings, this team should be a buyer. You are right now in the second wild card spot. You're a half game up on San Diego for the third spot and 2 games up on the Diamondbacks for the team that is first out of the wild card. And after today, you could be closer to the Braves for the top wild card spot than you are to the Padres for the third one. So the standings alone would dictate, this team absolutely should be a buyer.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I think if you don't buy at the deadline, you are doing a disservice to the fan base because this team has done, and to the team, because this team has done everything to warrant making some type of upgrade. And I would be as far as to say you shouldn't just go out there and get something minimum. You should go bigger at this trade deadline.
Yeah. I think with the standings, you are in that position to buy. Now, what makes it interesting is how aggressive you want to be in that bye. Because to me, you're not in a position because of the super teams that are in your league to be like significantly spending for like a Crochet, for example, that'll be available from the White Sox. But you are in a position to buy to make your team significantly better, to also give you a fighting chance if things go wrong for those super teams in the National League as well.
All right, next thing up here is maybe a little bit more telling. Go back to the standings page. What does the run differential tell you about your team? Don't look at it. Don't look at it, Cardinals fans.
That's what minus looks like.
It's not good. The Cardinals' run differential on the season speaks to the kind of game that they play. And what I mean by that is they play a lot of one-run games, especially when they're winning. There are only 3 teams in the National League with a worse run differential so far this season than your St. Louis Cardinals. One of them is the team that T-Bone said I should be watching out for in your own division. That would be the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're negative 35 so far this year in terms of their run differential.
Yeah. You're the Eastern Conference in the NHL. A team that is a minus goal differential is going to be in the playoffs and get wiped the floor in the playoffs.
We could be the Capitals.
Yeah, you're the Capitals. Yeah.
Whoa, I think the Cardinals are better than that Capitals team was.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, because they'll win a game.
They do both have over-the-hill stars.
Your run differential is supposed to be in green.
Yeah, green means go, red means stop.
Run differential does not speak highly of the Cardinals. Let's get to the next one. Is your team peaking at the right time? Kind of hard to say right now, but it does feel like they're getting better. Like the team that this would be really bad for is, for example, the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs were hot at the beginning of the season, and now they look awful, guys. This team looks abysmal. They're 4 games back now of the wild card. If it was the opposite for the Cubs and they started off really slow and they were trying to get back into things, maybe it would be a little different. They're not peaking at the right time. I think you could say that the Cardinals, with their health coming in the right direction, you could make a case that they will be peaking in the right direction, but we can't really say that for another 3 weeks.
I would put a non-answer on that one because I think peaking at the right time is post-trade deadline. I think peaking.
This is for the deadline.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought this was as a contender. Okay.
Yeah, I would say right now unknown, but I would say you're trending in that direction.
Yeah.
You want to really peak once you get post All-Star break, but you also want to be playing well going into the break, and that's what the Cardinals are doing right now.
All right, next thing up, where are the Cardinals at in their life cycle as a franchise? This is one that I think could go either way. Because on one side, you could say, well, we have probably one more year of Goldie and Arenado. We have some aging veteran starters that are having good seasons. And we have constructed our roster in a way where it kind of is a push to win now. But on the other side, you could say, yeah, but the guys that are helping you win right now are guys that are going to be around for a really long time, potentially. And so should you really be pushing for this year when in all likelihood you're going to be better either next year or the year after that? I could see either argument. I think I lean more on the don't push all in, but you should be pushing right now because of Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray is your number 1 starter, and I don't think you have an obvious internal replacement for him moving forward. And I do think you should be trying to win right now accordingly. So I would say push, but definitely not all in.
I actually think I'd lean more towards push more in the all-in category. And it's a different answer because if you would have asked me at the beginning of the season, I would have said the other direction because I didn't think the pieces you had in place looked like something that you're going to start winning more in the future. But now that we've seen Burleson win, Donovan have a lot of success, Gorman has shown that potential, I'd lean more towards, man, future-wise, this team looks like they're in a better position hitters. So if there's something that I'd give up a lot in terms of prospects for that is going to make me great on the pitching side of things for the next 3 to 5 years, I'd be more willing to do that now.
To me, you're an organization in transition mode. You're not in push now mode. To me, you're not in all-in mode. You're transitioning from the Goldie and Arenado era to this new wave of young hitters. And honestly, the rotation to me is not a win-now rotation. Yeah, Sonny Gray is an ace. Like, I'm not denying that. The problem is everybody else is just stopgaps. You know, right? The reason they're kind of operating with Sonny Gray the way they are is because they don't have any pitching. Why'd you go sign Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson? It wasn't for their performance. Like, their performance has been a win. You didn't expect this from those 2 guys. Why'd you sign them? To post every day. And if you're signing them to post every day, you're not signing them as, like, win-now pitchers.
But they are win-now pitchers. Gibson and Sonny Gray are.
I'd argue you're in such a transition.
Nice amendment. Yeah. Well, just these 2 guys aren't. Both of them.
The 3 did end up working out as win-now pitchers.
Both of them are on the wrong side of 32, but it's fine. It's fine.
To me, they are in a clear transition, and that's why I think, yes, you are still a buyer, you are not a significant buyer. That's what I would say.
The last thing here, and these are all from Steve Phillips of MLB Network, where he was talking the other day about what he looks at when he's thinking, what should we do as a team, as a front office in terms of buying at the deadline. He said, who are the players that could realistically be available, and are they worth the asking price that teams are likely to get this year? So this takes us to another former general manager, Jim Bowden, who wrote over on The Athletic. Jim's the best dude. He writes 7 pieces a week about the same 12 different players that could be traded at the deadline, and it's absolutely fantastic for content. So he wrote about the guys, according to his contacts across Major League Baseball, the executives, most likely to be traded at the deadline. Starting pitching-wise, said Garrett Crochet, Jack Flaherty, Luis Severino, Zach Eflin, T-Bone's guy Yusei Kikuchi, Jesus Luzardo, who is now on the 60-day IL. I'm going to go ahead and guess this was written about a week ago.
He'll be cheap. Go get it.
And randomly, Tariq Skubal, who is the #1 starter for the Detroit Tigers.
Why would you do that?
I don't totally understand why they would do that.
I mean, I'll go get that guy.
I'm going to put off to the side Luzardo and Skubal and Crochet because I do not think they're realistic options for the Cardinals. I think we can do the same thing, honestly, for Jack Flaherty. So, Luis Severino, Zach Eflin, and Yusei Kikuchi. We got 3 options, boys. It's not exactly a loaded deadline when it comes to starting pitching options for the Cardinals.
By the way, 3 options that every other team looking for pitching is going to go to that when they find out that you can't really trade for Garrett Crochet, Luzardo's hurt, and Matt Skubal's really not available. So you're going to be in the bidding war with 5 or 6 other teams going for those guys. Yep. But go get them, right?
Yeah.
Go get them.
If you had to say one of those 3 would be your horse you're betting on, right? The one that you would want the Cardinals to go get. Not that you think they will get, but that you would want them most to get at the deadline. Severino, Eflin, or Kikuchi. Kikuchi with the Blue Jays, Eflin with the Rays previously. Where was that guy? Was he with Philly previously? Yeah. And then Luis Severino, who's been with New York, one team or the other, for basically the entirety of his career. Which of those 3 would you want the most at the deadline?
Mine's Severino. He was the guy I wanted at the beginning of the season, and I get the injury pass, but I think when you talk about the most upside, I believe he provides that for you, and he would be a guy that I would be very confident going into in a game 2 of a playoff series.
For me, it would be Kikuchi. I think Kikuchi, left-handed guy, 9.2 strikeouts per 9, doesn't walk a ton of dudes. His ERA is a little high right now, but his FIP's 3.52. He, to me, screams like acquiring what you had in, whether it be Quintana in 22 or Montgomery. Like, I think he can come in, start a playoff game for you, and you feel really comfortable with him, and he's going to get swing and miss and be out of there in 5 innings, and you can turn this thing back over to your bullpen.
If you could promise me that Severino's going to be healthy, he would be my answer.
I can't promise that.
Well, he's been healthy all season.
He has been. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop with him. He feels...
Have a little more positivity in your life.
It feels a lot like...
from you.
Like, I assume Lars Nootbaar's just going to get hurt. Like, I'm going to enjoy him while he's healthy because I think he's a good baseball player, but he's going to get hurt.
Cardinals assume Gray's going to get hurt.
Yeah, for sure. Severino is that kind of a pitcher where you're just assuming that he's going to get hurt eventually. And if he's fully healthy, he's going to be pretty good. Honestly, there's some Tyler O'Neill there as well. We're like, hey, man, if everything is in the right direction, he's confident, he's healthy, it's going to look good. But if not, could go the wrong direction. And so for that reason, I'm with T-Bone. I would go Yusei Kikuchi. I think he's a really good pitcher. I think we have underestimated what he is. I think he's basically Jordan Montgomery. I would like them to re-sign him if he ends up coming here via the trade deadline. I think he would be a guy that you could keep around for the next couple of seasons. It won't be like this overwhelming deal that gets a bunch of headlines or anything like that. Kikuchi's turned himself into quite the pitcher, and he's striking out more than 9 per 9 innings. He does not walk very many either. He's a good pitcher, and if you got him as a number 3 mid-rotation starter, I think you could really convince yourself that that's a good rotation.
In a best of 5, I don't think I'm starting Kikuchi in any of those games.
Oh, he's probably on this team game number 2. He's better than any of your starters.
I think I think you're starting Gray, Michaelis, Gibson before Kikuchi.
Totally disagree. I think he's better than those guys, other than Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray's better.
Your goal is to not have Michaelis start a playoff.
Those 9 runs in the last 6 innings look great.
Yeah, but I can pick one game from Severino that was bad.
Yeah, how about those 10 strikeouts and 0 runs against the Cubs?
Yeah, if we're going to cherry pick, Kikuchi's just the better arm.
It's not cherry picking. It's recency bias.
Yeah,
I'm not going to have that dumb argument.
He throws 96. He doesn't walk anybody, and he gets a bunch of strikeouts.
And he gets the ball on the ground, I think, too.
Yeah, I like that. That's the profile of pitcher that I would be trying to acquire.
Toronto's the team where I would try and package 2 together. Now, this one's a little harder to sell because he's dealing with an elbow injury, but I would try and package a Kikuchi and Yimi Garcia kind of trade. You get a bullpen arm that's right-handed, could help add to your depth, and you get Kikuchi, you could start game 2 free in the playoffs.
You guys want to hear the most likely bats to be traded at the deadline? Because it is not inspiring.
What?
Cardinals are lucky that they don't need any of these guys.
We need a cleanup hitter. What are you talking about?
Jazz Chisholm, Randy Arozarena, who's not been good this year, Taylor Ward, Tommy Pham, Luis Robert, Pete Alonso. And I don't think Pete Alonso's going anywhere.
I actually wouldn't be shocked if Alonso got dealt.
You think?
Yeah, I think he's going to get dealt. I think a team's going to go aggressive because they need a bat.
The Mets and the Red Sox, to me, are the two most interesting teams this year at the deadline.
I think the Mets are upset they're playing well.
I think the Red Sox feel the same way.
Yeah.
I think both teams are like, can we please drop out of the playoff race? Please.
Stop it, guys. You're not supposed to win.
And right now, the Red Sox are in the playoffs as of today, and the Mets are 1.5 games back. So it's going to be difficult for them to sell their fans on we should sell, but it's probably in the best interest for the team long term to sell. It'd be interesting to see what those teams decide to do.
I think it's easier for the Mets to try and sell, especially if you're still like below 500 and hanging around. I think if you're a below 500 team, to me, it's hard to convince yourself, even as a front office person, that that team's worth investing in. But when you're the Red Sox and you're whatever they are, 6 games above 500, that one's a lot tougher to sell in terms of becoming sellers.
Coming up next, you give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one's more likely in a game we like to call more likely to happen here on BK and Ferrario.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about Rhino Shield, the exterior of your home. For how much heat we've been having, now you've got the rain. This is what takes the paint, the exterior look away from your home. Over time, that rain washes it away. You get water damage on the side if you're just using generic paint. The sun beating down on it, the UV rays, it deteriorates. It looks faded. It looks old. It's time to use Rhino Shield and update and get that long-lasting ceramic coating that they provide. It sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any paint you're going to buy over the shelf at the hardware store, and it's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. I can talk about this because I used them 3 years ago, and my house looks brand new today, the exterior coating that Rhino Shield provides. And whatever type of siding you have, whether it's block, brick, wood, cedar, they stick to whatever. So give Darren a call today, have him come out, give you a free estimate, and find out what it's like to get the coating of a Rhino on the exterior of your home or business. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for more likely to happen. You give us 2 scenarios. We'll tell you which one is more likely here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, more likely to happen for the Cardinals. More likely to start a game for the Cardinals sooner. Jordan Walker or Tommy Edman?
Yeah.
Tommy Edman. I don't think we see Jordan Walker again this year.
Damn.
I think maybe you see him towards the end of the season, the last couple of weeks, maybe. I don't think you see him again, though, until that point, unless a major injury comes up. Even if Tommy Edman has a sprained ankle, I still see him making a return at some point post-trade deadline. I don't know if we see Walker until late August or early September.
Yeah, I think I would say more likely Tommy Edman as well. And the Cardinals don't sound overly concerned about a sprained ankle. Granted, I know how the Cardinals operate. I think you can get him back and going within like the next week or so, get him on his rehab, and he's back maybe post-All-Star break, somewhere around there, maybe right before the trade deadline. I just have a tough time figuring out when you would see Jordan Walker. And I don't even know, like, you don't need him, and I don't know what his role is, so I kind of lean towards with Alex. Like, I would say definitely Tommy Edman.
I'm going Jordan Walker. There's some encouraging signs. You guys know I'm going to be a sucker for this. There's some encouraging signs lately with Jordan Walker, not even just with the actual numbers, but some of the underlying stuff. He's hitting the ball harder, even though he isn't like getting the ball in the air a lot. And when I say that, guys, I should clarify. Even though he's not hitting a lot of line drives, he's hitting more, and they are more productive when he does it. So I'm going to say Jordan Walker. I think eventually the Cardinals will be incentivized to get Jordan Walker back to the big league club. And Tommy Edman's getting shut down. Like this is not a situation where he's just like, hey, next couple of days, take it easy. No, it sounds like he's going to get shut down, and it might be a minute before we see him again.
It's fine.
Oh, good, man.
So I'm going to go Jordan Walker's more likely to be starter before Tommy Edman. Alex, what do you got for us
Guys,
today?
more likely to happen. The Blues offer sheet Shane Pinto from the Ottawa Senators or trade for Jacob Chychrun from the Ottawa Senators?
Who was the first one?
Shane Pinto.
I would say Jacob Chychrun.
I'm really convincing myself that Shane Pinto's the one you offer sheet. I just looked at this. So with the Ullmark trade, Ottawa's got $11.3 million in cap space available to them. They've got a guy coming off of the injured reserve who's making $8 million. So that's $3.3 million available to them next year. Their defense is basically locked up. They've got 7 forwards under contract, 8 when the guy comes off of injured reserve, with $3 million to produce.
That's the kind of situation that you want to take advantage of if you're Doug Armstrong.
They can't match unless they trade somebody away a 6x6 offer to Shane Pinto.
And that puts him on the spot because now other general managers, like, for example, with Jacob Chychrun, who's scheduled to make this year $4.6 million. Another general manager will say, well, I know why you're trying to remove this off of your books. I'm not helping you right now. I'll just wait you out.
And they got a match or a week to match it.
And then they just end up having to give up Jacob Chychrun for less than what they otherwise would be able to get for
you
him.
Do that, you were giving up next year's first, second, and third round draft picks.
Isn't it first and third?
It's first, second, and third if you're above $6 million. So you're giving up a lot. But this is a 23-year-old, nearly point per game player who's a centerman. I'm saying it's more likely Shane Pinto.
I'm still going to say more likely they trade for Chychrun just because I'm not sure we're going to actually see an offer sheet. I think it's a lot of talk, and it's a lot of fun talk, but we know how these GMs operate.
They should, by the way, offer $6.4 million. It's a first and a third round pick.
So 6.5 is first, second, and third? Yeah, so I'd go 6x6.
Yeah.
Because Pinto wanted this was Bruce Garrett who covers them for the Ottawa Sun. The Senators don't want to go long-term. They want to bridge him.
Interesting.
He wants a long-term deal.
Oh, there you go.
I'm more convinced that this is the guy you go with rather than Martin Necas. Because I don't think Ottawa's screwed.
Yeah. Guys, more likely to be on the Cardinals playoff roster, assuming they get there. Jordan Walker or Victor Scott?
Man, Victor Scott has real value in a playoff series.
Yeah.
Does he, though, if you have Michael Ciani as your fourth outfielder?
Yeah, speed.
And Tommy Edman?
Down by a run, get a guy on, put Victor Scott in the game, he's immediately stealing second. You have produced slugging percentage. You basically have a double when he gets on.
And I just feel like you've got 2 other guys that you're going to in that scenario before you get to Victor Scott. Ciani.
He's not as fast as Scott. I don't care. Scott
Ciani might be starting for you.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Scott would never get in that bat in the playoffs for me.
Yeah.
He wouldn't touch. If he bats, then something went wrong.
He'd come in for defensive reasons or for pinch run. Most likely he'd be a pinch runner.
Yeah,
that would be his main
He'd have
value
the role. What was that outfielder that TLR had in that 11 run? Was it Adrian Chambers? Was that who it was? I think it's 2011. Adrian Chambers, or 2013 maybe. Either Matheny or La Russa had somebody that was like a designated pinch runner. I think it was Chambers that it was. But there's Terrence Gore, who was with the Royals when they won
Terrence Gore was the guy that did that with the Royals.
Yeah, I'd say it'd be more likely you'd see Victor Scott just because of what we're talking about. I think he has so much value. I think there's a chance he's up in September when they expand the roster to 28.
Him and Kloffenstein.
Ton of value. Well, maybe not a ton of value in Kloffenstein, but a ton of value in Victor Scott to steal second base as a pinch runner.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for more likely to happen. I'm still going with Jordan Walker just because I said that I think he's going to be back. And if he's going to be back, he's starting for you in the playoffs. And that means that he's playing. But, man.
I mean, if you wanted to flip because it's a great argument, you could.
I do. I think both could be on the roster.
Whoa.
Not enough roster space, man.
That's not how the game works, man.
Brandon Crawford's not on my roster.
What are you talking about, man? You were just saying yesterday he should be your starting third baseman.
Okay, well, that's not ridiculous.
You said the bat's hot. You gave the numbers. Since Mother's Day, he's got like, what, a 500 slug?
He's been really good. All right, more likely to happen. Chief wins a Stanley Cup or Mike Schilt wins a World Series?
Wait, say that again? Who was the first one?
Berube wins Stanley Cup.
Or Schilt a World Series?
Yeah, it's Berube. They got to get a goaltender first, but it's Berube.
I'd go Berube too. I can't. I like the Padres when they're healthy, but they're not healthy right now, and the National League's gonna be really tough to get through. And I understand that the East is looking like it'll be tough too, but I'll buy into Berube more than I will Mike Schilt. Sorry, Schilty.
Yeah, mine's Berube. You have got the roster at least on the forward position.
I'm not in on Schilt winning in San Diego. I don't believe in that team.
Yeah,
I don't think that team is built with winners. I think they're built with losing.
Got a bunch of like Arenado and Goldies.
You guys know how I feel about it. All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. More likely, the Blues trade for Natchez or extend Buchnevich? I think extend
I think they're kind of tied in with each other, to be honest with you. If you're trading for Natchez, you're probably trading Buch.
I think the most likely outcome this offseason is that the Blues end up signing Pavel Buchnevich and making very few other moves. That's my most likely outcome.
I don't believe Buch is going to be back. I really believe that he is not going to waver off of wanting 8x8, and the Blues won't go to that point. I don't know if it's trading for Natchez. I guess I'll say that's more likely to happen. Again, you go to the offer sheet side of things. You get a first-round pick by trading Buch next year and reset that. I'm going to say it's more likely you trade him for Natchez.
I would say trade for Natchez as well. I'm with Alex. I just don't know if Buch is going to be here, especially when Army said mid-30s and kind of had a little slip there when talking about their contract negotiations. So I'll say more likely they trade for Natchez.
All right, that's what we got for more likely to happen. You gave us two scenarios. We told you which one was more likely here on BK and Ferrario. In 15 minutes, we'll hit the rewind. But next, Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, we'll ask him that question here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals currently taking on the Atlanta Braves in Game 1 of their doubleheader today as they are in the top of the first inning. Kyle Gibson is getting the start for the St. Louis Cardinals. Ronaldo Lopez will be on the mound for the Atlanta Braves in Game 1. Then Game 2 tonight, 6:15 will be first pitch. Bryce Elder gets the start for Atlanta. Matthew Liberatore will be on the mound for the St. Louis Cardinals. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have the first round of the NBA draft. We'll have coverage starting at 6 o'clock. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
The Cardinals and Braves look like similar teams to me. I don't know about you, Alex, but when I look at their records, when I look at what they've done so far this year, the lack of production from some of their stars, they're kind of mirror images of one another. And yet, I think if you asked most casual baseball fans or specifically Cardinals fans, they would say if you had to point to which team is more likely to make a run this year in Major League Baseball, most people would probably say the Atlanta Braves. And I'm curious, Alex, why do you think that is? What do you think it is that's pointing people in that direction?
I personally think some of it is the ceiling of some of those players. Like a lot of the ceiling for guys on the Cardinals that are success right now, you still don't know what it looks like. And the ceiling of Goldie and Arenado, who you know what it looks like, you don't believe it's going to get there. Whereas the ceiling of a lot of the Atlanta Braves players, you've got Matt Olson, who MVP caliber player, Austin Riley, MVP caliber player, Ozzie Albies, very much an impact bat. Like, to me, the ceiling of what the Braves can get to when they're struggling is watch out for that. And the ceiling for a lot of these Cardinals players is I don't really know what that looks like other than Goldie and Arenado. But I think a lot of people are done with the part of those guys are going to get back to MVP level.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument that some of the Cardinals have maybe a higher ceiling than what we're suggesting, especially based upon what they've done so far this year. Like Mason Wynn, I think has every bit as high of a ceiling as what Ozzie Albies has been for most of his career. I think they could be similar offensively, and Wynn plays a more premium position. You look at what Alec Burleson has done this year, that's a pretty high ceiling for a guy that could be like a 25 home run hitter batting 290 right now. Wilson Contreras has been every bit as hot so far this season when healthy as what Marcell Ozuna was. So it is an interesting discussion. I want to get back to that coming up here in about 10 minutes in the BK and Ferrario Rewind. But we do have Chris Kerber, the voice of the Blues, joining us now via the 101 ESPN hotline. Kerbs, we have now reached the end of the 2024 season. The Stanley Cup has been won. It is the Florida Panthers that were able to do it. You got to see that 7-game series. You can't beat a 7-gamer in the NHL. What was your biggest takeaway from seeing those two teams go head-to-head?
BK, I think my biggest takeaway is, especially now since we have gone through what it takes to win a championship in the NHL, is that I think you can pretty much tell whether or not you have a tight enough group to win it. If you don't have a tight group, you can't win. And that's my biggest takeaway is as much as talent matters and all that stuff does matter, you have to have culture. And I think that's one of the biggest areas I have no doubt the Blues are going to be looking at as they start to bring people in is who are they bringing in and does it fit a culture that allows you to win?
Kerbs, I think a lot of people look at Florida as a team that, they've got the core in place, the culture in place that you just referenced, and they're going to do this a lot within the next few seasons. But what about the Edmonton Oilers? They seem like a team that after missing out, going deep into the playoffs last year, and then losing in the Stanley Cup final, they seem like a team that is at a massive crossroads with their roster.
I don't know that, Alex. Listen, it's hard to win. It takes time to win. The Florida Panthers, without a shred of doubt, learned from their losses last year what it was going to take to close this out. And now the Edmonton Oilers are finally getting there. Go back to one of Wayne Gretzky's greatest stories. And when they lost in the Stanley Cup final to the New York Islanders, he goes, and you thought you'd be walking past the locker room and see all these people cheering and stuff. And you could see how exhausted that the New York Islanders were having won that Stanley Cup. And Wayne Gretzky said that's when we knew that there was a whole nother level we needed to find. And then they went on the run, winning 5 Stanley Cups. So it's still part of a process, and in the end, they're closer, but they didn't have the goaltending that Florida had, and that's the biggest difference.
Curbs, now that we have officially reached the offseason, what's your biggest question that lies in front of you for the Blues? What do you want to see answered over the next week or so as we get into the draft and then, of course, free agency next week?
Well, listen, we can throw out there what we want and what we think should happen, okay? But I just think we have to stay realistic in terms of we know what Doug Armstrong has said. We know what Tom Stillman has said. There's been some real consistency in their messaging. So I'm not anticipating a lot of things that are going to make people go, holy cow, whoa, and wow. Now, that doesn't mean that can't happen. That doesn't mean that won't happen. I mean, let's face it. Nobody knew that Ryan O'Reilly trade was coming, right, when it happened. So there is possibility for that. What I'm looking for is, again, I think they're going to take another real solid player at 16. This team knows how to draft in the middle part of the draft. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens at prospect camp. I do think that when it comes, they are going to have to sign some players. So I think the most exciting time for St. Louis Blues fans might be as free agency gets started, as movement, as markets get set. But I really do think that they're looking for some quality character in the locker room. They're looking for someone that can understand where this team is at and people that are going to be able to help younger players become players in the National Hockey League. The Jamie Langenbrunners, right? The Daryl Sadors that were brought in here. The Jason Arnotts, for example, that Doug Armstrong brought in to help along the Oshies, the Berglunds, the Backuses, and that group. And to me, I think this is that. It feels to me like that same kind of window and that type of player that they're looking for.
What if I told you, Curbs, that there's a player that's played more than 1,100 career games with 300 goals and more than 700 points in his career, and he spent the vast majority of it playing for a team that resides here in St. Louis.
That player sounds familiar.
He is about to be a free agent. He's 36 years old. At the back end of his career, is considered to be one of the best locker room guys in the league. And every time that I've ever seen him on the ice, first one on, last one off type of guy. Any chance you could see a reunion with David Perron happening?
Could I see it? Hell yeah. I mean, I still don't understand. I still don't not understand. I understand. I still don't agree with the fact that the Blues didn't re-sign him previously in that previous deal. I have not talked to David. I do not know where he's at. I am surprised, to be honest with you, that Detroit hasn't extended him at this point in time. So unless something happens over the course of the next, 7 or 8 days, then he does become a UFA. I think David Perron's going to be sought after. He can play a role like Joe Pavelski did with the Dallas Stars. David Perron's that kind of player that actually could replace Joe Pavelski, in Dallas, that kind of thing. But I couldn't agree with you more. You're talking about a right-handed shooting left wing that can get you some power play time, still be effective on the PP, that has leadership ability in the room, that has the swagger of having been a Stanley Cup champion, that has the knowledge of the league, that clearly loved to be here. That, to me, if there's one off-season move that I personally want to see, that is clearly one of them, without a shred of doubt. And I think he would be an excellent re-signing. And then think about this. If the Blues did happen to re-sign David Perron and then he finished his career with St. Louis, you would have a player that has left the franchise by every possible way. By trade, by free agency, by retiring, and by expansion draft. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
That really is.
Only signed one contract anywhere else, too.
I was going to say, I would love that narrative for David Perron. Like, you go down as a St. Louis legend for something like that. Hey, Curbs, do you still believe that a top task for this Blues front office is finding a way to change the look of the defense?
I think it's a tough task because of the contracts, the way they're structured right now. For example, if you look at the way these are structured, right now Torrey Krug has a no-trade clause, and we saw him implement that clause a year ago. But at the end of this upcoming season, that becomes a modified no-trade clause where he provides 15 teams you can't trade him to. Now, does that mean that the other 15 teams want him or not? I don't know, but it gives you a little more flexibility. I see more flexibility for them to make adjustments, especially with where with one less year term on some of the other contracts, I see more of that available at the end of this season. So, from my standpoint, and again, I please, again, guys, put the asterisk on it, okay? Everything and anything is on the table, okay? That moves can happen, but I definitely see them having much more flexibility for that type of adjustment a year from now than they have this year.
He's Chris Kerber. He's the voice of the Blues. Joins us each and every Wednesday here on BK and Ferrario. Kerbs, we appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy yourself this weekend as the NHL draft gets set. We'll talk with you next week as we get set for the NHL's free agency.
All right, guys. Have an awesome weekend. Enjoy the draft.
You got it. Chris Kerber, voice of the Blues, joining us as he does each and every Wednesday on BK and Ferrario. We'll hit the rewind coming up next.
Hey, folks, out of sight, out of mind. That's what all the different appliances and things that help us keep comfortable in our house really are handled, right? Well, that's no different than your air conditioning unit. It feels so good, especially after 100-plus degree heat yesterday, to walk into a perfectly cooled home to your right temperature. Well, I'm going to put something in your mind. It's classic air care. All right? We know it. I get it. Some people are like, I'm not doing maintenance unless it's absolutely necessary, whatever. Well, when it is necessary, when you start to hear the fan sputtering, when it starts to not cool the way you want it to, call the folks at Classic Air Care. They've got a 4.8 Google rating. They are local. You'll see some of the techs come into your house, and they might have a patch of an older company. Well, that company is now part of Classic Air Care, and they still have the techs from that company wear a patch of their older company, still staying connected to the localness that is St. Louis. And it's an awesome tradition that they have over there. It's Classic Air Care. Keep them front of mind. Put them down in your phone when you're listening and when you're saying, hey, what if I need that? I want to have that right at my fingertips. It's Classic Air Care. You can go to classicaircare.com. You can book an appointment online. They'll come to their house. They'll take care of you well. Trust me on this. This is one you want to have at your fingertips if things go kaput in the summer heat. Classic Air Care, making people comfortable since 1926.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so T-Bone's biggest fear today with the Cardinals going to the bullpen game when Game 2 was, well, what if things go wrong for you in Game number 1 with Kyle Gibson, and he ends up going short, and now you put yourself into a spot where you're relying so heavily on your bullpen in Game number 2. And I said, T-Bone, think about the 2 starters that you trust the most to get you deep into a game. For this team right now, it'd be Kyle Gibson and it'd be Miles Mikolas.
And I said, I don't care.
And Kyle Gibson has thrown 34 pitches and has recorded 4 outs. And he has so far walked 3 batters in this game. It's not going well. He does not have his command. And I do wonder if a lot of that is because it's been so long since he last pitched. I saw a stat earlier today. He's typically much worse coming off of 6+ days rest in his major league career. The last time that he had more than 3 walks in a game for the Cardinals was on May 11th. He has not had that many walks since. He has only had 1 game since April 19th. With more than 3 walks. He has 3 walks through the first, and he has 4 outs today. He has no command, guys. Yep. And he's at 34 pitches so far today. This is the worst case scenario for the Cardinals. Your hope is that he's going to be able to go out there and eat it, gives you 100 pitches. Hopefully he gets through 6 still, but it is not looking pretty thus far.
Yeah, you're in trouble. I mean, like T-Bone just said during the commercial break, Gibson has to wear it, but this is a different type of wear it because if he was getting shellacked and the pitch count was still low, then you'd say he has to wear it no matter what. But, I mean, we're talking about almost to 40 pitches, and you haven't gotten 2 outs yet in the 2nd inning. This guy could be closer to 60 pitches by the time you enter the 4th inning, which, to me, is detrimental to your bullpen because you're going to have to use guys sooner than you expected, and now you're not going to have as many weapons for you tonight. No, by the way, Matthew Liberatore is the one that's starting for you.
Yeah, and that's the part that's concerning for me is the fact that you're going to that bullpen in Game 2 for the entirety of the game. I think when you're in a doubleheader, you almost need starters to eat at minimum 10 innings. The bullpen to cover 8. Problem is the Cardinals are going to rely on 10 to 11 innings, and depending on how long Gibson goes, potentially more than that on their bullpen. And look, some of those guys can eat a couple. Like Roycroft has been stretched out a little bit in the minors, so he could probably give you 2. Libby's going to try and give you 3. King could go 2 maybe. Gio's Gio. Lee, he can maybe go 3. The problem is like now that you're starting Gibson, and again on that, what you talked about, and you're probably right, command's probably a little off. Maybe something's a little out of whack right now, and maybe he can settle it down and get his mechanics back in line. But the problem is okay, well, he needed to eat like 6 innings in this start because you're going to the bullpen. If you had Palante in the next game going, okay, now you may be able to get a little more length out of him. The best case scenario for Liberatore is 3, and that's like the maximum, and now you're behind in that game as well. So I don't think they handled this very well for this doubleheader.
The other thing that's really tough is it puts you behind the 8 ball for the series against Cincinnati as well. If you had an off day tomorrow, you could live with that because now your bullpen ends up it's fresh and it looks good. The bad thing is like if the Mikolas start tomorrow goes poorly, because now you just start this cycle of, okay, so you lose this game potentially. We don't know what's going to happen. Like maybe the Cardinals end up just going off offensively. I'd be surprised, but maybe they really start hitting well against Lopez later on today and they win this one like 7-5 or something, right? Well, now you're going to be able to use your back into the bullpen and that works out. If you don't, if it goes the way that it has so far and you're down 3-0 early in this game, now you have to use the underbelly of your bullpen in this one, potentially again in the next game tonight. And now the Mikolas start goes poorly, and now you're potentially using your leverage arms in a loss. And that's the worst position to be in as a manager is I have to use these guys, not I want to use these guys. Then they potentially aren't available for a winning scenario later on in the series. It's a trickle-down effect. That's what happens in games like this. Hopefully he gets back on track, maybe finds something, they're able to figure it out, and he gets you through. Even if he gets you through 5, that's okay. But if he goes less than that, you're in a bad place. Yeah. Really bad spot.
And my concern is even today, no matter what, you're going to have to probably use some of those high leverage arms. You know, I wouldn't be shocked no matter what Kittredge pitches today. I wouldn't be shocked if JoJo gets an inning at all today because you're going with a bullpen game in Game 2. Everybody's only going to pitch once today, and that probably means at some point you're going to run out of arms and have to use a high leverage arm. Whether you're winning or losing, you're probably going to have to use them today because you don't have a starter for game number 2.
I mean, we're talking about almost 50 pitches before you even get out of the 2nd inning. Like, that's a guy that's not going to be able to get you even close to 5.
So one thing to keep in mind when it comes to what the Cardinals could have done today, one other thing that I thought maybe they would do, I thought maybe they would have ended up calling up like a Gordon Graceffo. I think Graceffo's scheduled to start today, if I'm not mistaken, for the Memphis Redbirds, and they decided not to do that. that could have allowed them to eat more innings today as well. It would have required a 40-man roster spot, and we know the hardest thing in the world to do is to adjust the 40-man, but
Luke and Baker needs to keep his place.
They got a catcher they could have DFA'd, and I'm not talking about any of the three that you're thinking of. The other thing, too, I wondered, just real quick, tinfoil here, Kloffenstein was started yesterday.
Correct.
I wonder if Kloffenstein, if he had a good outing, they would have started Palante today, and then Kloffenstein would have been on turn for the time you get to that spot. But he got roughed up, did not have a good outing.
The whole reason for this, though, is to push back Sonny Gray, so they wouldn't have been able to do that.
And this is the concern when you have to baby one pitcher and take care of him. It ruins everything.
And they didn't know about the game being rained out last night until it was already too late. And then when they hoped that when maybe they would have considered Kloffenstein, they didn't have an option to do that because he was already starting down in Memphis. So they were in a tough spot, and it has not gone according to plan. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Hey, hang out with Jamie Rivers, 101 ESPN, and Stella Artois this Thursday from 6 to 8 o'clock at Cyberg's in Maryland Heights. They're partnering with Hot Ones to bring hot wings and hot trivia questions. I love hot wings, or hot ones, and hot wings.
And hot trivia questions.
Check out the trivia. Visit Cyberg's now to find out how you can sign up to participate in the competition. Thursday, 6 to 8 o'clock with Jamie Rivers at Cyberg's in Maryland Heights. Check out full information at 101ESPN.com. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane as you covered from 2 to 6 right here on 101 ESPN.